All right, we're live. Welcome to another episode of 10 Horseman YouTube channel, Tuesday Night Live. And on the other end of the camera, we got the underdog. Man, I actually like the underdog. I like that. It's a good little thing to have in front of the name because it just makes sense, man. It makes sense. Hope everybody had a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. I actually I stayed up past midnight. I stayed up to like 12:30. I was kind of proud of myself. I was talking to somebody about this. Like the last 5 years, I'm 2 for 5 on staying up past midnight. So yeah, it's weird. Like on a normal night, I have no problem staying up late, 11:30, 12 o'clock editing videos. But it seems like when I have a day off the next day, I have a problem staying up late. It's really weird. It's probably because I'm so dang tired from staying up so late all the other times. But apparently, the guy right here across the field had a surplus of fireworks left over from 4th of July because about 10 till noon or 10 till midnight, he just started blasting them off. And we're sitting me and my wife were in the living room watching. We were watching it was a crazy movie. It was about child trafficking. It was really tough to watch. But anyway, we're watching a movie. Let's just keep it at that. And all of a sudden, we just started hearing these explosions going off outside, and we walk out in the back deck, and it's just about every minute, and it went on for I don't know 5 or 6 minutes after midnight. But it was kind of cool. What'd you do for New Year's? Anything?
I went to Texas and went chasing double digits on the last day of the year and then New Year's Day. And so last night we got done fishing, loaded up about 7 p.m. and drove home. I got to bed about 3:35, 3:40 this morning, somewhere around there.
Oh, so, wow. Yeah. But
ended the day with end of the year with fishing and started the year with fishing.
That's perfect, man. Yeah.
And you were successful?
We were very successful.
I would say so. If you haven't checked out the social media posts that John made, go check them out. He caught some bigs.
Yeah, we dropped some meat for sure.
Hey, I held my little 2.5 pounder that I caught yesterday.
Yeah, it's proud to catch one on the first day.
You got to hold them. You could still get kind of close when you're doing a selfie, but you can't get too close.
Yeah,
so there's definitely a fine art.
When you can only get like a head and like half a jaw in there from a selfie, you got a big.
Yeah, alligator. Let's see. I posed a question just to start the show out, and it was, what's working for you guys right now as far as baits? And Doug from Auto Trieve says jerk bait. That's what I had to go with the jerk bait yesterday to get bit. I started out trying to find a jig bite, but it just wasn't happening yet. Darius is a rig and a Ned rig.
That's opposite ends of the spectrum there, Darius.
Yeah, and a Kitech Easy Shiner for all December fish. I haven't thrown that Easy Shiner.
Darius, man, he's like power fishing or super finesse, huh?
Yeah, right.
He's one or the other.
He's on Kentucky Lake. I threw an A rig a little bit yesterday. I seen some fish I couldn't get my jerkbait down to. Well, I could, but I didn't want to wait like 20 seconds for it to fall. So I just threw that little A rig out there and got him kind of fired up.
I was about 30 minutes behind you, brother. So
you went to bed at
9:30, man.
You went to bed at 9:30? Wow. It's impressive, dude. Very impressive.
So what are we going to talk about tonight?
I don't know. I do want to say something, though. Couple announcements real quick before we get going. First, we are going to be doing a giveaway. Actually, one giveaway tonight. And the way the giveaway works, I see some new names in here and people that have been on the stream, followed it forever. They know how it works. But sometime during the stream, we're going to make a reference to Sasquatch. So when you hear that word, guess a number between 1 and 200. And John's already given us a number. So whoever gets that number right is going to win a $25 gift card from Baitworks. And also here in about 30 minutes, my main man, Mike Marfell, is going to jump on here. And he's got a special announcement for all the folks that are going to the Let's Go Fishing Show in Collinsville, Illinois. I'll kind of just let him break it down. It's something he's been working on. Oh, we lost John. He'll be back in. Something he's been working on for the last couple of days, and it's going to be nice. But I'll let him talk about it. You're back. So that's going to be coming up here shortly. And what else was I going to say? Oh, if you haven't seen that, I really enjoyed that stream you did the other night with Alex Rudd. That was a good stream. So everybody on here that hasn't seen that, go back and check that out. It was real talk, man. You guys were really talking about some deep stuff. I know he had lost his father last year, and you lost your father not too long ago. And I lost my father. It's been about 10 years ago. We were just talking about this at Christmas time, and it was a freak accident. My dad lived in California, and he rented a jet ski, and he was out on the ocean by himself. And then he was found about 10 minutes after he had rented that jet ski by a lifeguard. And don't really know exactly what happened. We're theorizing that he probably hit a wave and hit the front bar of the jet ski and got knocked unconscious. He had a life vest on, but he was, face down. And long story short, he drowned, and it was, it was tough. I wasn't super close with my dad, but because I was a lot younger. I don't know. I when I'm looking back at that now, I wish I would have put a little more effort in it, because it's like I really wish he was around now to see my kids growing up. My daughters are 15 now, and he saw them when they were younger, but things have come so far since then, and you can't get that time back. It's gone. So, but anyway, I really appreciated you guys talking about and diving into that stuff. And we don't have to start out talking about, super deep stuff, but it was good. It's good to hear that stuff. It's good to hear, two grown men talk about, their feelings and about the hardships, and that, we've learned so much from the people that raised us. So I appreciate that talk, man. I really do. Let's see.
Yeah, I think there's too much, or not enough conversation that's got substance that can actually help us grow. There's a lot of criticism and hate and negativity out there, and those aren't really solution things. So, being able to help, be a little vulnerable. Some of my negativities that I had last year, some of my difficulties I had last year, I really bottled them up and hid them inside, and it ended up causing more damage to me than, being willing to go ahead and just talk about them. And, so that was a lot about what that conversation was about. And in turn, how does that affect your fishing and going on from there?
Well, as men, we're taught at a young age to not show any of that, right? Like, cut your finger, you smash it with a hammer, whatever, shake it off and toughen up, buttercup. Let's go.
Throw some dirt in it.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And that goes, that kind of translates into emotions too, right? I mean, it's not just cutting your finger or sticking a number 2 treble in your palm of your hand and then ripping out with a pair of needle nose.
No, I would cry if that happened. I'm sorry. Some things you got.
It doesn't hurt that bad.
Oh, really?
Especially when they're biting, it doesn't hurt that bad at all.
Did you ever see that? Do you remember when KVD got that? He was throwing that 10XD. I think he was on Rayburn. I think it's the Derby that he won, but he got that. It was a 10XD. He got it caught.
I think it was Toledo.
It was Toledo.
Yeah, I think that was Toledo.
I was watching that live. I was delivering mail, and I was just watching it. I'm like, oh my God, it was hard to watch.
Yeah. Polinick did that too on what's that that lake in Arkansas, northern Arkansas, Bull Shoals. Was it Bull Shoals or Norfolk? He won that event too. Remember, he had to go to the hospital.
Yeah, was that when he was throwing all the Rapala, like the DT-16s or something?
Yeah, he was cranking a roadbed or something of that nature.
Yes.
Yeah, I think
was
that Bull Shoals?
Yeah. In fact, a funny story is Mike, that's going to be on here in a little bit. He had a tournament that following week on Bull Shows, and he was fishing that. He was fishing that roadbed, and he snagged up one of Polinick's DT-16s or DT-20s.
That's cool. I would keep that next time I saw him. I'd try to get him to sign it or mail it to him and sign it and send it back. Yeah, a little piece of bass history.
Yeah, Darius says we got to live every day to the fullest, because you you never know if tomorrow's going to come. And that's so true. Coming in my job, we're just coming off of a super demanding season. Like the last month and a half, 2 months as a letter carrier or UPS carrier or FedEx, any kind of parcel service. Anybody that's on here that works in that field knows that it's been absolutely nuts, and it's hard to stay positive sometimes. It's like can be overwhelming. But I always think about exactly what Darius is saying is you don't get the day back. The day that you're in right now, this day is a day that's passing, and it's your choice to make it however you want within reason. Try to make it the best you can and shake that stuff off a lot of times. I'll get down for 10 or 15 minutes, but then I kind of start laughing at myself and I'm like, really, is it really that bad? Is it really as bad as I'm thinking it is? Or am I just making it? Am I feeding the fire? And whatever you water is going to grow. So it's something we got to remind ourselves constantly and try to just have the best day that we can have.
Yeah, try to stay away from chasing the materialistic stuff. And there's no substance in it. There's no length and there's no longevity of life to it. There's really no truth in it because it's all a blur. It's all going to fade away. And so, find a purpose in your life that's beyond, just building your ego up with, falseness and, and stay focused on that stuff. There's just so much negativity out there in the world right now. And to me, it's very simple where it's just misplaced guidance. People are built after the image of God, and they try to take that and put it into something that's not of God. It's a lot of things of the world, and so they're broken and they're lost and they don't know why, because our egos tell us we're so smart, we're so important that we shouldn't feel that way. So we're just misguided energy all the time. And then that's when people get in the little chat rooms and they're so broken that they just next thing you know they're just cussing each other out. I mean, I've been cussed out to the fullest extent just from somebody making a comment on my page about whether a fish I posted was really a 10-pounder or not. And, the other day I was responding, and I finally responded to the guy. I was like, hey, man, are you all right? Like, what's going on in your life? Why are you like, this is so much misplaced hatred. And, like I said, man, it's just a bunch of wandering souls lost trying to take it out on each other and not really go to where the real source of, love and care and concern is at. It's not in whether we, catch the biggest fish or win the tournament or things like that, or even whether our opinion's right or wrong. Really, none of us have the right opinions. We may think that we're right, but there's always perspective and viewpoints and a way to share that information that's got empathy towards another soul that's across the table from you. And that's not necessarily the easiest thing on earth to remember. And that's why we have these hardships come in our life, everybody individually, is because if we didn't have these hardships, we would just get built up with this ego. Our egos would continue to grow and grow and grow. And thereby we have no concern for our brother that's across from us. All we're thinking about is ourselves, and we become more selfish. And the more we dive into our selfishness, the more negative return we have in our life. And if we don't stop and take responsibility for that negativity that's in our life, we all have excuses. I mean, there's a ton of negativity that I had last year that I look at and I'm like, these are these people causing me harm. And 100%, these people are causing me harm. But what have I done internally to internalize this in a more positive way? What have I done? What could I have done better, to negate, such harm to come my way? These conversations, you really have to stop and put your ego in check to be able to man up like you need to, and resolve these things internally so that you don't take this negative energy and it's like a snowball effect. You start rolling a snowball down a hill, it doesn't just stay the same size. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So if I take my little snowball of energy and negativity and I throw it to you and you take it and pass it on, well, guess what? You put a little bit more of your energy into it and by the time it circles back around to me, now it's this huge thing. And that's how you get a situation where a guy goes postal for no reason, or like you got traffic, road rage and traffic over some of the littlest thing, because some guy barely accidentally honked at you, you know. And right now, it seems like with politics the way they are, I mean, I got my opinions of politics too, and I do think there's some importance to it, but that's not the most important thing out there. And when all these negativities just continue to like get just thrown and thrown and thrown and thrown around, and nobody's stopping and taking responsibility for what's deep down inside them that's broken, the end of what we're talking about is destruction. There's no resolution by continuing to throw these negativities around. It's to find the positivity in life, you have to find the purpose of why you were made, why you were created, and put your energy there. And that's where your source of peace, freedom, strength, that's where it comes from. And that's where it comes from me. With that being said, I'm not the most perfect example. I've just found these things to be true in my life. And the more that I don't adhere to my own understanding and preaching, if you will, the more that I become the same image of negativity that I'm talking about. I find it to be, you know, true in my own life. So I know you talk about like deep questions and stuff like this, but like it is something that whether you're in the fishing industry or whatever niche that you have in life, everybody right now is dealing with the same thing. And I think a lot of people out there are just like, you know, the big question is why? But we're really not stopping to just focus on ourselves and to solve that internally within ourselves. So.
Yeah, I think the whole self-reflection and the owning it, like when you do something, own it. If you mess up, you make a mistake. We all make mistakes. We're all humans. An apology goes a long way, and sometimes that's one of the hardest things to do is admit that you're wrong and apologize to somebody. But gosh, it can go so far. Just holding yourself accountable for every situation that you're in. That's one of the things that really drives me crazy that we see going on. I definitely don't want to, go talking politics and stuff, but it isn't just politics. Like you said, it's the world in general. You see so many people doing things like sleight of hand things, and it's obvious to some people what's going on. And a lot of times they just double down on that thing. They don't ever do the right thing and say, hey, at this point in time, I thought that this was right. I've since learned that it's not, and I apologize. Maybe I shouldn't have said that, or maybe I was just growing. It was just where I was at in my life, and I didn't realize that. Basically own it and then apologize and come back. You just don't see that a whole lot, and it's unfortunate. People would rather double down on things and keep going with it. Man, if anything will humble you, it's definitely fishing, especially being a tournament fisherman, because it's you can be at the top and then at the bottom just within a couple of tournaments. Man, we've all been there. I had a pretty tough year last year too, in my little local derbies and stuff. I had a couple of really good years, and then last year was tough. And there's sometimes you get out there and you're like, I don't even think there's a fish in this lake. I've been there. I'm like, I can't find a fish. And you have to keep going. I think you just got to push through it and eventually it'll come back around. But it can get tough sometimes, when you think you got it all figured out. And as soon as you, like you said, as soon as your ego starts talking to you and you got this little creature sitting on your shoulder chirping at you saying you're the best, you'll get slammed down and put in your place. You got to be humble.
Yeah. I mean, that's, a couple of years ago, I won 2 national events and led the opens points for a long time and qualified for the elites, and really couldn't do much wrong. Cash checks pretty much every national event that I fished in. And then last year was complete opposite. Finished 100th in the Angler of the Year. So, I have to do a lot of evaluations, and there's been a lot of things that I found to be true in the past, and I'm having to reapply and remember that I was just doing it out of second nature, good things, good decisions on the water. And I got in a role for about 5 years, well, probably 10 years, where you just continue to grow and grow and grow. And I've been just getting better and better and better and better and better. And I was just, I no longer had to think about it. I was just instinctively doing, to the point really where I lost I forgot what I'd even learned. I was just doing what was right. And then I stumbled into some things, and then through the pressure of the elites, and the pressure of social media, the pressure of making a living as a professional fisherman. Like, I'm not I was never very good at doing the Mr. Popularity contest. I just had too much of like take it or leave it attitude, growing up. That's just the way I am. I'm very black and white when it comes to the way I speak, and I can come across harsh. Like, I've gotten so much trouble. You can Google my name on the internet. You'll be like, John was such a blah, blah, blankety, blankety, blank, because I crack dry humor jokes, right? And I guess some people are just like, they must be 5 foot tall because it goes way over their head, And and then they're like, man, I hate this guy. Did you hear him? I cracked a joke at Eufaula, Oklahoma, and said that the guys that were fishing on the release bank were cheating. It's a joke because locally we call it the cheaters bank. It's just like a phrase, that's grown, because how many times that we come back at the end of the tournament, like, you had to use the cheaters bank to fill your limit because it's loaded with fish, So it's just a joke and not serious. But back to kind of what we were talking about on the fishing side of things, man, there's a lot of really simple things, a lot of little bitty simple things that I think make the difference between your good local fisherman and then your great national fisherman. We've all seen a bunch of good local fishermen make it, and once they get to that national level, they get spanked. And I've seen it my entire fishing career, watch some of my best friends, and then I finally had the opportunity, and guess what? Same thing happened to me. Spending so much energy and trying to, maintain the look of sponsors and try to almost play a popularity game, because if you're popular, then the sponsors come around, then you get paid more money, which allows you to pay the bills, and it's a cycle that just it just can really get in the way. It's a hard bounce. It's a really hard bounce to do. And, I literally found myself really on the water last year not having fun. And I think it's a simple thing to say, well, just go have fun on the water. But when you got all those different things, all the different demons in your head going at you, just having fun. But that is the truth. I've always fished the best when I'm having fun. My first word was fish. I love to fish. I never thought that I would have an opportunity to be a professional fisherman. I've just loved the game. I've been involved with it. I've just stayed after it because I just love figuring out these little green fish. And time came, blessings came, and next thing you know, here I am with this opportunity. And that's something that I'm going to adopt next year is staying back, having fun. I've done really well in the opens when I wasn't doing well in the elites. And one of the things I chose to do in the opens was I kind of fished the way that I wanted to have fun. There was times I could have done several different things, but if I had to choose between two things being equal, or maybe one thing even being less, I did better if I chose the technique or the style that I had fun with. And so there's a few little things like that I need to apply in my fishing to keep myself positive, motivated, and somehow it ends up translating, man. It ends up translating. Have you ever noticed how, like, you having a bad day, you're having negativity, maybe you kick the dog or something before you went out of the house, and I don't have a dog, by the way, but if I did, you understand what I'm talking about.
Yeah. You're gonna be all over the boards now, and John's kicking dogs down the street,
holding fish wrong.
There's a PETA guy outside knocking on my door right now. So,
right.
But you're having a bad day. Have you ever noticed how, like, those are the days that you all of a sudden you're just losing fish? It's like something of that negativity translates through that reel, to that rod, through that line, and to that hook set and land of fish. 100% does. Even fear does. You know what I mean? If you're fearful when you're reeling in that fish, you'll lose more fish. Like you notice the times that you're pre-fishing, you really don't care if you get it in or not. You're just not even really setting the hook. You just kind of like you can't even shake the dang fish off. And he comes around, circles around the boat 2 or 3 times, and you get him, and he's all hooked. You didn't even try to. It's because you didn't care if you landed that fish or not. There's a portion of that has to be maintained, and it's an emotional and mental state that you have to maintain.
I've had that conversation with my buddy Jerry when we're in the boat together, and we come up with some really good theories out there in the water. And the energy, like you said, we were theorizing that there is some sort of energy that is transmitted through your line And there's days when you're just not going to get bites because you're not bringing good energy out to the lake. I mean, and I've felt it. And there's other days where you just feel good. You're in a good place. And it seems like you're in, not to sound woo woo or anything, but you're kind of one with the environment and things are going good. And those are the days when you can't do anything wrong.
A lot of times that starts like when you left the house that morning. Too.
It does. Have you taken care? Have you cleaned?
Did you forget
clean shop?
Did you forget to put the gas cap on? You get to the lake, you smell gas. You open up the back hatch, and we got John boats, our little gas tanks in the back, but there's gas all over the back of the boat, and now you smell gas the whole time, and that's what you're worried about. Now that sets off your day, right? Like you went to the gas station, you left your wallet at home, whatever. There's a whole spiral of negativity, of bad things that can set you off. But
tying up loose ends too.
Yeah.
Like were you supposed to cut the grass and you're out there on a lake?
You're thinking about cutting the grass.
Yeah, and as soon as you get home, you're going to get hammered for leaving and not doing your chores. It's like tying up all the loose ends. The better you can be, the better you can have all your business taken care of, which we can't all the time, but the better we can do that, the more our mind is at ease out in the lake and the more we can fish. But yeah, man, there is something to that negativity out in the water. I'm a firm believer that
how many times I'm sure we've all said it when you're reeling that one in on a crankbait going, don't come off. He jumps out there like 15 feet and there goes your crankbait. And it's like, well, there he was. And then like you said, in practice, you ski that 4-pounder in on a crankbait. He's got one hook on the side of his cheek, just barely skin hook. You boat flip him, and he never comes off. That doesn't, and you look at it and go, that doesn't happen in a tournament.
Yeah.
So I had a really rough season, lost a lot of good fish. I was just a bad season. Everything was negative, and I got to Eufaula, Oklahoma, and jumped in that the open at Eufaula, and that is, as far as the home lake goes, it's a couple hours from my house. But I mean, as far as my success, I've done really, really well there, and so. I was still in this who am I as a fisherman? I'm not myself mentality. And I even had some set of nerves that I'd never really felt before, or been a while, I should say. And so day one of the tournament, first fish of the day, I ended up losing a 5-pounder. And by the end of the day, I lost so many fish. I lost about 22 or 23 pounds of fish, which is a huge sack on Eufaula. I think I ended up weighing like 15 pounds, and I was still sitting decent, but it was like, I lost the tournament on day one. And because of that, I drove home because it was close enough I could drive home. In the drive, I ended up staying. Sorry, I was driving in practice. During that process, it was kind of one of those things when the failure was just over, like all the stress went away. And so the next day, I mean, I even felt it. I was like, the next day I went out, I was like, I'm not going to lose any fish. The care or concern or the over anxiety to do what's right, like that's what was causing me to lose fish. Mm-hmm. And so I literally had to walk through myself and tell myself, when I get a bite, get all the negativity that's out in life, get it out. And at that moment, all you do is focus on landing that fish all the way through, and don't have any kind of mental lapse at all. And stay calm, stay patient, stay positive. And the next day, I didn't lose any fish. I had 19 pounds, and I ended up going on to day 3. And actually, since that point, it was straight demarcation line. The rest of the season, I didn't feel that. It was gone. I finally overcame and beat it. But it took me like literally wrecking the shit, going through all of the elite season, wrecking all through the elites, and then having it happen one time on a lake that I know it should have never happened on, and to be like, okay, I'm done. It's gone. It just ran. It had to run its course through me. I wasn't able to beat it myself. I really wasn't. I took some time. I was trying to, but it had to run its course.
How many guys from the regional level to the national level you think that is like the number one failure reason for failure?
Well, I don't know about the percentage, but I do think that there's the difference between like a regional guy that says, well, the doc talk after the tournament, I could have won if this would have happened. I could have won if this would have happened. I think that a lot of the guys that are at the national level had the same things happen to them at those events. That we're just so used to it happening, having a lost fish. You see KVD lose a fish, and that crankbait's back in the water before that fish is even landed, right? Like, he doesn't react to it. He knows that he just needs to go back out. instead of, you know, throwing a fit and then letting that negativity into you. Next thing you know, you're not even thinking. Now, I had that personally happen to me this year on the elites, where I end up, you know, getting what I would consider like an paralysis by analysis on the water. Like I wasn't covering the water that I used to cover. I was fishing almost in fear of moving around like I should, and staying around an area where, okay, I'd seen these fish here yesterday, they got to be here today. I'm going to continue, you know, work it out. And that's a part of it too. You know, there's a lot more than just landing the fish, but just even having the freedom and to be willing to make a risk or to move around, and not willy-nilly, or not without direction. But let me give you an example and tighten it up a little bit what I'm thinking. When you're fishing really well, you got that sixth sense going on, and like your gut will tell you, hey man, go throw a jig on that point where, and you might be throwing a spinnerbait the whole time, and then something keeps telling you go throw a jig, and you just, without question, your gut tells you to do it. You go pick it up, you make one cast of jig, you catch a fish. And how many of us have done that? And like you may spend the next hour throwing a jig and never get another bite, but like something told you to pick up that lure, and the first cast, boom, you catch a fish. Well, that's that sixth sense. That's that ability of your mind to pick up from everything that's going on in nature, that you really, through experience, your body knows that you really mentally don't, you know, you're not really the one making that mental decision to do that. It's that gut instinct is telling you to do that. Well, when you're really on fire, like your gut says, go through a jig in that point, you catch a fish, and without even hesitation, you put that rod back down and you go back to throwing a spinnerbait. And people are like, what in the world had him even think? Why did he do that? He just caught one on a jig. Why doesn't he do that? Well, it's because he's, you know, you're listening to your gut. And when it rolls like that, you feel dangerous on the water, man. You're catching fish no matter what you do. Every decision you do is right. You're not making any mistakes. And it feels like it's just a gift. Everything you do is a gift. Now, if you have that negativity running through your mind, and you have all those world worries and hatred and all that stuff inside of you, what happens is, and self-doubt, right? And you haven't proven that gut instinct and all that yet. So you're more kind of on that regional level, and you haven't allowed yourself to break into that national level. This is one of the main differences. There's a lot of them, right? But here's like one little lining factor. A lot of the guys, I think, as they learn and as they become better and better, they start having those gut feelings, but they haven't proven them yet. They haven't trusted them yet. So they ignore it. So now that thought that's been in their head, it's been in their head for 3 hours. Well, they may have done everything they can. They may have gone and beat the bank that they were fishing for 3 hours, and the whole time their gut's telling them, hey, go throw a jig on that point, go throw a jig on that point. And they're just ignoring it. Okay, now they fish the whole bank with a spinnerbait. So now they load up and they go to that point and they throw a jig. Well, they either catch a fish and then it's too late because they've wasted their day, or they don't catch a fish because they should have done it 3 hours ago. And it had a lot to do with just, you know, lack of confidence in listening to that gut and thinking that they can go out and like be an engineer about fishing. And I used to be that way, you know, 10 years ago for sure. I mean, I was very, very engineered about everything I did, and I had success doing it, but I didn't have the success that it took to take it to the next level. And so what I had to start doing is, I may engineer my day to about noon, but I left an entire portion of my day from like noon to 3 or 4 for weigh-in where I didn't have a plan of what I was going to do on that port. And that way I left practice in my tournament day. And that, you know, that starting the day with that confidence to trust my instincts and allow my instincts to come out is where I really started seeing a lot of success, because you're fishing by the moment. You know, you're picking up on patterns. You may end up fishing the tournament completely different than what you practiced for 3 days. So that's when you really, really start seeing the success. And that's where you really start seeing the separation between, you know, your regional level guys and even national level guys that are trying to make it, and like the elite guys that have made it.
Yeah, we got Mike down here in the queue, but before we bring him in, yeah, so something that I've been working on the last few years, and gosh, it's like you're in an area, you pull up in an area. Well, first of all, I'm trying to go to the lake without preconceived notions. And I've mentioned this a bunch, you know, being a content creator, I want to go out and I'd like to do a video on a jig. We're talking about jigs. I'd like to go do a video on a jig, which is what I tried to do yesterday. So I try to force that bite. And I know based on the lakes I'm fishing, when it's overcast and there's a little bit of wind and the water's in the 40s, I need to be throwing a jerkbait. I just kind of know that. I know that.
It's not a jig day.
No, but I've already got, I've got some jerkbait stuff. There'll be a video dropping tomorrow where it's a jerkbait video. So I'm trying not to saturate with the same stuff. So a lot of times I'm making it harder on myself. It's always hard, but sometimes I make it harder on myself by going to the lake with preconceived notions. But something that I'm really trying to get in the habit of doing is, if you pull in an area and you're throwing, you know, what you think is a high probability bait for the situation that you're in, and you know the lake and you know the area pretty well, and you're not getting bites, I found that I need to move. I need to move out of that area. Maybe I don't need to go really, really far. I don't need to run like all the way up the river, but I might need to go to the next cove or something, or to the next point. Because a lot of times what I've found, and Mike, we've had the same thing happen several times fishing at Lake of the Ozarks, is if you're in the right area, a lot of times you'll get a bite within like 5 casts or something. If you pull into an area that's alive and the fish are feeding, the bait, everything's kind of jiving. But if you're in that area for 15, 20 minutes and you don't really get bit, you probably need to pick up and move. Go, if at the very least, just to get a fresh look at things, because your mind will start going south. It'll start going negative. If you're fired up, you're ready to catch some fish, and you're 30 minutes in, you haven't got a bite, you kind of start getting, your focus kind of starts waning. So one of the best things to do is actually pick up the trolling motor, just go for a little short boat ride, start that process over. And a lot of times you will get a bite, you know, within the first 5 minutes, and that'll kind of recharge your system and get you woke up again. Do you find that happening out on the trail sometimes? I mean, you know.
Oh, it's the biggest deal, man. What you're just talking about is the guys that win the elite events, they win it in how they practice. Now, it doesn't mean they won practice, but they broke down and eliminated so much stuff in practice that they understand, or they're putting the pieces of the puzzle together during practice, that they fully put it together on tournament day. And a part of that is that ability to cover a ton of water, whether that's physical acreage, whether it's shoreline, whether that's, you know, top to, you know, vertical in the water column, whether it's different rocks or different cover. You know, they're able to break that stuff down really, really, really quickly and get tuned into where the fish are at, where that, you know, they say where there's smoke, there's fire, right? Where that bait usually is the smoke and the fire is where the fish are feeding. And so they're able to find that a lot quicker by listening to that 5 minute, 10 minute. I think KVD might have had like a 15-minute rule back in the day. It was one of the first times I heard this. If you haven't got bit in 15 minutes, you're going to change. You either change location or change baits, but you need to change something for sure. And I will tell you something else that you said. I was just thinking about this the other day. You know, so many times, especially when I was early on, when I was doing a lot of LiveScope and stuff before it became as popular, you know, because I mean, we did some videos about like basically Mythbusters, bass can't be caught on LiveScope. People thought that, you know, you couldn't catch a bass on LiveScope, and we were like trying to prove to everybody that's possible. So back in that time period, you know, people would come and they'd ask me to go do a live with them or something during COVID, especially, and they'd want to force us to say, hey, do that thing with the jerkbait in the wind and you know, with LiveScope or with A-Rig. And I get there and it's blowing 30 miles an hour, and I'm like, if it was a tournament day, I wouldn't even be doing that technique. But they're like, they got to have it done. They got to have it done. And it's such an uncomfortable feeling, because I'm also, because of my personality, sometimes when like I don't know how to just say, no, you're wrong. Like, I know that we just put this whole thing together, but like, we shouldn't be doing this. So you just force it. And the whole time you're telling yourself, this is wrong. This is wrong. I shouldn't be doing this. And then you're up there looking like an idiot because you can't catch a fish, and they got you on live for 2 or 3 hours. And you're like, I shouldn't even be doing this right now. But they want you to catch the fish. That I know exactly what you're talking about. Forcing the subjects on the content is one of the most difficult things to do. And it's the same thing that guys do that caught them the day before in practice, and they go tournament day and they try to replicate what they did the day before. And they're like, well, you know, because they're trying to force exactly what happened. Well, yesterday it worked because you showed up with an open mind. You had 1 day to practice. You had open mind. The weather conditions fit, and you started catching them. Well, the next day something changed, and you're trying to force what happened the day before instead of listening to what the conditions are telling you to do that day.
Well, you fish the moment in practice, right? Like, you're reading the conditions, you're doing everything right, and then all of a sudden we forget like that we read that book 3 days into that practice, 3 days before that practice, we got everything prepared. We were on point. We found this and we had our blinders on. We didn't look to day 4, 5, and 6 that we needed to do this, this, and this and make these critical adjustments on those days. You're smart enough to figure it out in one day of practice, but why don't we just wipe that slate clean? We know where they're at. Just start over again the next day. I mean, nobody's ever won practice, right?
Rich said your office is coming along nicely, John. You got the push pin board up there. It's
with like one piece. There's 2 on there.
I am embarrassed to show my office, man. I moved in this thing. We just threw things in. I set the computer down and said, let's get to work. It's been months. I got trophies strung all over the place. It's a mess. I thought about like maybe getting the MPFL, like the $50,000 things behind or whatever like that, or but yeah.
Hey, it'll come in time. It always does.
This office is about business. It's not for show yet.
Let's bring Mike in. He's been waiting in the queue. He's got a special announcement. I'm excited to hear what he's got going on. What's up, Mike?
Hey, what's up, guys? I was hoping you wouldn't bring me in. I was digging what John was saying, man. That's some great info, John, that mental side of things. That's why shows like this are so awesome. And guys like you willing to share that. That's awesome, man. That's good stuff.
I'm looking at the screen right now, and I'm looking at Gabe, myself, and you, and it's like baby beard, medium beard, big boy beard. I like that.
Yeah, I try to look less homeless. That's what I tell him when I go to get it trimmed. Make me look less homeless.
I had something here. He's got hanging over his shoulders. So.
Yeah, JB was giving me crap about all this mane on my head too.
He's gonna cut that all off and donate it to me. So when I'm running down the lake this year, I got something whipping in the wind.
Yeah, we're making JB a wig is what we're doing. That was so good though, John. Your attitude is to be commended, my friend.
I don't know about commended, but I appreciate that.
It means a lot. That's what people need. We can talk technique all you want, but I can't catch your fish, but I can take your mental attitude and go catch my fish with it.
Oh, 100%.
If that makes any sense. Hey, I won't rob John's time because I want to get back to listening. I just want to let everybody know what we got going is if you come down to the Let's Go Fishing Show in Collinsville this Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, there might be a little break there Saturday where I'm not there because my daughter's wrestling the high school tournament on Saturday morning. So I'm going to go watch that, but then I'll be at the show. The first 30 10-horse Monty customers or viewers that come down and see me take a selfie, we're going to get you a TH Customs custom painted jerkbait from TH Customs. Trey's painting them tomorrow. So the first 30. After that, you might get a fine used jig or something out of my box. We'll see what we can do. Mark at Bluff City will probably come up with something if we get over 30 viewers that come down. But we just want to see how many 10-horse Monty viewers can come out or Bluff City Outdoors viewers can come down to the booth and get a selfie, and we'll throw you on their Instagram page.
So you'll be at the Bluff City Outdoors booth. Just come up, say you heard it on 10-horse Monty, take a selfie, and you're going to get a really sweet.
Get a pic.
First
come, first serve. We got 30 custom jerk baits, different sizes, different colors. Just come on down. The first come, first serve. I'll have a box. You pick one out and take it home with you.
Try to get them out on Friday. Let's blow this out of the water. So
yeah, if that's the case, I'll dig into my own stuff and get shit out on Saturday and Sunday. But or I'll go over and beg Joey at Crock Gator to give me something. One of the two.
Right. That's pretty cool. So there you go, man. That's good stuff.
Yeah. Well, you guys have a good show. I don't want to keep John because I want to hear more what he's got to say because that's the kind of stuff people need to hear, John. Techniques that's one thing, but hearing that attitude that's got you where you're at now that's 100% accurate. And I wish I was smart enough to keep that damn DT 16, but I threw it back out there and ended up losing it before the weekend was over. I was desperate to catch fish, my friend. I ended up in third. I ended up in third in that tournament. Didn't catch any off of that same bridge he was on, but I figured it was way towards the back. They had to go that way towards the front. So I kept hunting for him and finally found him more out towards the front of that creek and ended up getting third at a solo pro there. So not too shabby for a guy that's only been there a handful of times.
I thought for sure you saved that DT16.
Hell no, I figured it worked for Brandon. I was going to throw it, man. I had a tournament to try to win.
That makes sense.
Another funny story in that, when we checked into our resort, the guy said, well, it's going to be good luck because the guy that stayed here the weekend before you won the tournament. So we stayed in the same room as him and Zaldain did too, me and the wife and the kids. So funny how things work. And you'll be able to see Brandon at the Let's Go Fishing show this weekend too. He'll be there.
Okay.
Him and Steve Kennedy, I think, are the two Elite Series guys. Or yeah, I guess they're both still Elite Series guys. Or has Tim moved over? I don't even know. Or Steve Kennedy.
No, he's a bass. He's a bass elite.
Yeah, he's still in the
Okay. So yeah, one of the craziest guys to talk to. I did the elites as a co-angler the last year. You could do it as a co, John, and got to know some of those guys. That's when I realized I've already got a job. I don't know if I want to work this hard for a living. So
I'm a little and Steve Kennedy will be there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good. It's the best fishing show in the area by far, hands down. No doubt about that.
All 3 days?
I don't know the schedule for sure, JB, but Brandon usually is there all 3 days. He comes for Dupont Marine.
Last handful that I've been at. So
yeah, he's been at a bunch of them for sure. For sure. I usually go over and talk wrestling with him because my daughter's doing the wrestling. Try to get some tips. So
perfect.
Well, I'll let you guys go, man. Hey, John, thanks for letting me steal a little bit of your time, buddy. Good luck out there on the road, man.
Thanks, Mike.
Hope to meet you soon, bud.
All right. See ya.
Take care, guys.
That's good stuff, man. Very generous. So all you guys got to do is go to the Let's Go Fishing show in Collinsville. Go up to the Bluff City Outdoors booth. Say you heard it on the 10 Horse Money YouTube live stream, and you're going to get a custom painted jerkbait by Mr. Trey Harple that's on here right now.
And looky there, right there. He is.
So that's awesome. Yeah, he was wanting to throw something together, and he was kind of talking to the owner of Bluff City Outdoors, and he kind of ran some stuff by me, and he just came up with it here today, like exactly what he wanted to do. So it's pretty kind of you guys, sir, kind of Mike and Mark to do that. Back to what we were just talking about. Another problem that I have is trying to make, like, say you take a crankbait, you really like throwing a crankbait. That's like your confidence bait. It's like, how do you know to give up on that crankbait, or do you continue to bounce around the lake, all over the lake, and try to make that crankbait work? That's the question that happens sometimes. It's like, have I just not covered enough spots? Is my timing off, or are they just not going to react to a crankbait that day? I mean, you ever run into that situation? If so, like, how do you make those adjustments on, knowing when to switch a bait or keep grinding on that bait and jumping around the lake?
Yeah, I think that obviously experience comes big time into this, but if you don't have the experience and you're trying to learn, just realizing that it's not as imperative that you figure it out that day. Like, you've got time in your life that you need to figure out these things and grow, right? And to start with, you're looking at the conditions of the seasonal conditions. And I think the reason why you look at things like that, because you want to understand fish movement first, right? You want to understand, are they coming, are they going, water temperatures, like weather, sun, cloudy, things of that nature. You need to understand like what their bait forage should be, and all that factors in to the time of the year, which tunes into which will help you when you show up to not have 10 rods always. 10, I mean, you might have 10 rods on deck, but 10 different techniques that are so drastically different from each other. So that way you can already kind of say, well, these 2 or 3 main ones should be able to get it done. And I might have a backup, some backup tools that I use for a specific situation, because there just may be a certain lure that you have to use for that certain piece of cover or what you will. But that will help you turn into understanding what the fish. And so then you're looking more at separating it are the fish feeding, or if they're not feeding, I'm gonna have to get a reaction bite. And does the reaction bite need to be something heavy and fast, so we're talking about rate of fall, or something extremely slow? So these are the things that you're doing. So when you're asking yourself, well, should I keep throwing the crankbait? Should I keep throwing the crankbait? I don't think that that's the right question to ask. I think you should be asking, why haven't I got bit in this area? Okay, if I'm bumping the rocks, and I'm going to assume for a second that there's still some fish here. I don't want to spend the next 5 hours there. So now I've kind of covered the bottom with some horizontal movements, but I haven't really put anything down there to settle. So I may decide that, I'm gonna pick out a few pieces of cover, and I'm actually gonna flip something, and I'm gonna let it settle in a little bit. And like I said, depending on the time of year, I might decide that I'm either gonna let it settle and drag, or I'm gonna hop a little bit faster. I'm not gonna spend a whole lot of time doing that. The other option I might say is, hey, these fish may be looking up, and I'm going underneath them, right? So if they're looking up, like in a fall situation, when they're looking up at the bait, that's when maybe, a spinner bait, something that stays up higher, or a topwater, could be something like that. So you'll stay in that same area and maybe, pick up a different lure, and throw it around a little bit. And like you say, if you throw a crankbait for 20, 30 minutes in an area and you're covering bank, not getting bit, you pick up a spinner bait for a few minutes. And if all of a sudden you get one to swirl on or get one to eat it real good, and you got to pay attention also to the bite, If you haven't been bit on a crankbait for 2 hours and all of a sudden you catch one, he's in the back hook in the very back, it's the fish will tell you a lot of times if they're reacting to it, they want it or not. And so if you're positive that you've got the bait together, you've got a couple bites, they're eating it real good, but you just only got a couple bites in the area, that might not be the best area. But if they ate it good and it matched that time of year that crankbait should be going on, that there's, let's say, that there's a crawdad hatch going on right now, and you got a red crankbait and they're just chunked, swallowing that thing. Or like if it's a wintertime deal and you're throwing a wart or something like that, and they're eating it real good and you're not getting bites, well, then I think that's time to start saying, okay, it's time to change areas. And not only just areas, but if you've been going down the bank itself, have you really focused on the transitions? Have you really focused on the bluffs? Like being able to compartmentalize what time percentage are you putting 100% of your time into only one aspect of cover and structure? And if you haven't got them figured out yet, you need to stop and say, okay, this stop I'm going to hit a point. If they're not on this point, I'm going to hit the transition. If they're not on that transition, I'm going to hit the bluff, and then I'm going to repeat that process, and I'm going to keep moving from down the lake up into the, maybe I start towards the dam, then I work my way up to the river. And, obviously you don't have all day long to do something like that. So you might say, okay, I'm going to spend, an hour or so down this section of the lake. I'm going to hop around from points to transition rock to bluff, some shallower flats. And I'm going to test that out a little bit. And if I'm not getting bit, then maybe I make a move about halfway up the lake. And then I fish mid lake, and I do the same thing mid lake. And if I'm not getting bit, then I'll move up into the river and do the same thing. And by the time your day's over, you're 8 or 9 hours. If you've done it right without running around like an idiot, you kind of, you're able to dissect and get a lot better answer of where the fish are positioning. And then once you've kind of got that broke down, you can go back and maybe use some of your cleanup tools in that same area, or start running, hopefully at that point you've found a pattern for that day. And you're like, okay, mid lake, they're not on the points and on the bluffs, but man, these transition areas between the two, every side, it's like literally I look at and I know exactly what cast to make on every. And now instead of making 50 casts down that bank, you're pulling up to the spot. You're hitting it about 5 different angles, 5 different casts at the same angle, and hey, they're not moved up on this one. And so now you all of a sudden, once you get tuned into that pattern, you go run 100 spots, and half of them you've never even fished before in your life, because you've established a pattern. And so that's where you start breaking those things down. And it's no longer about like a magic lure in a magic area, because there really isn't such thing. A magic lure in a magic area, that's a daily experience that happened that day. When it does happen, it's magical. It's happened to us all. But just because your dad caught him on a black and purple power worm, on lake X, doesn't mean that that's the color that you need for that lake every single day forever.
Yeah, you nailed it, because that's something that you have to really stay disciplined to do what you're talking about. You have to be very focused, disciplined, and you almost have to have you have to put perimeters on yourself as far as I'm going to run these transition areas for 3 hours, and then just you know, at the end of 3 hours, I'm going to sit down. I'm going to think about what, you know, what I found. Is it making sense to continue to do that? Or do I feel like I need to go in a completely different area of the lake? Or do I need to just scrap it all and start doing something else? I know with like offshore fishing, I found out over the years that I have a tendency to scan a few areas, and then if I find a little bit of something that looks okay, looks mediocre, and I just want to get my line wet, because maybe I've been idling for 30 minutes. So I'll shut the boat down and I'll jump up on the front deck and I'll start casting, and I'll end up fishing an area for 30, 45 minutes. And it's a place that I know I shouldn't have stopped at because it doesn't have quite enough. It's got little sprinkles of something, but it's not really what I need to be finding. So when you're offshore, it's imperative to be super disciplined and scan a bunch of areas until you find what you need to find. Instead of somebody like us and most of the people that are on here that don't get to fish a whole lot, we're itching to go fishing when we get to the lake. You know, we've been working 5 days a week or whatever it is. Even if you're not working, it's your day to go fishing. You want to get a line wet right away. And sometimes it takes us a lot longer to find fish. And the reason I was talking about offshore is it's something I've been learning over the last several years is you have to be committed to finding the right spot. You're looking for something that it's gonna be worth your time stopping on. And you have to fight that urge to just stop at the first thing that you see that looks okay, because it's just going to be okay. I learned this from my buddy Ron. He'll spend several hours idling, but when he stops, you're going to catch some fish, or he'll find something that's good, that's worth stopping and keep on moving. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah. I've been on the boat with him.
Yeah, it gets nuts. Sometimes that spot's not out there. Sometimes it's just not happening. You're not going to find it.
And sometimes you catch 30 off a spot and you still haven't stopped catching them, and he goes, "Let's go. We've caught too many. Let's go."
Because it can get right. I mean, you've been in that situation before, but I mean, somebody that doesn't do it a lot, they're gonna stop too soon instead of continuing to idle and marking potential spots. And I think that's what separates some of the decent fishermen from some of the really, really good ones, is being disciplined enough to keep moving until you find what you need to find, instead of just
and sometimes
setting the trolling motor down and covering water.
Sometimes the adjustment is that, though. Sometimes the adjustment, so we fish a lot of small lakes, sub 2,000 acre lakes. Well, there's only 24 offshore spots that are going to produce. Maybe it's pulling back and fishing brush piles. Maybe it's fishing a transition area. Maybe it's fishing something completely different when your preconceived notion was go fish offshore, right? So you just got to know when to.
Sometimes it's not happening.
Yeah, you got to know when to shut it down and go somewhere else.
Sometimes the shad move into the grass. We have almost all our lakes have grass. So if you're out there idling around for an hour or so and you hit it doesn't even take an hour really. It takes you like 30. If you got 5 or 6 spots where the fish get when they're offshore, you can idle those in 30 minutes. If you're not seeing bait and stuff, the bait's in the grass. So you're just wasting your time, most likely.
And then you're going to find that one spot like you were talking about a while ago that's got just a little bit there. It's not right. You're going to catch a couple.
Yeah, because you're wanting to fish offshore, and so you're going to spend a lot of time out there fishing in an area that
when you should be going up there flipping the edge of the grass.
Yeah, so that's just like, I'm just kind of throwing out random things for myself to just as a reminder, and for people that are on here. It's that sometimes you just gotta continue to search until you find what you're supposed to find.
Yeah, I think to your point, I don't know that the average fisherman really understand or can comprehend the amount of hours that a guy that says that he's going graph it, that knows what he's doing, actually puts in behind that graph. And like, it quite literally, certain lakes, whether they've been there or haven't been there, they may not make a cast for 3 days of practice. It may be all idle time behind that, and they're marking and studying the environment. They're learning more than just spots. They're learning the environment. They're learning what the bait are doing, where the bait are at, what depth they're at. They're learning what kind of structures out there to be had, whether there's like hard rock drops, steep drops, flats, brush, grass, man-made brush, timber, like they're putting all that together. And then they're also watching the weather and they're predicting based on the weather and the conditions and the seasonal pattern of what these fish are going to be doing. And they may, during that time, they may see what they need to see, stand up, make a cast or two, boom, immediately get bit and be like, okay, I'm on. I kind of know what direction they're. The very best are doing that. And I think back to 20 years, ago, when some, like on Grand Lake, when some of the best fishermen that are out there, and there's guys that, big names that locally we all knew as they were the hammers, right? And a lot of those guys were brush pile fishermen. And so, I decided I was going to learn how to be a brush pile fisherman. So I'd go out and I'd graph around and I'd find myself a brush pile. And next thing you know, I found out basically I'd spend 4 hours on that brush pile. And then the next time I came out there, I'd spend another 4 hours on that brush pile. And I just couldn't figure out how these brush pile fishermen are catching these many fish. Well, then you come to find out that they had 200 brush piles. And in a tournament day, they'd pull up, they'd make 5 casts on a brush pile. And if they didn't get bit, they were gone. And they learned how to triangulate so well that they never missed the brush pile. And, they were going out the tournament days before practicing. They'd go out and they, without a hook, and they're going to cast in their brush piles. And as soon as they got bit, they shake it off and they mark it. So now they've got, before tournament even start, they got 20 of the 200 they've already cast in. They already know they got bites. So they're going to run and rotate those 3 or 4 times in a day. And so the math, the odds of them getting bit are just that they started the day way ahead. You were never, unless you got lucky and found the honey hole of all brush piles that had 5-pounders and sat on it, you're never going to win a tournament. Well, I can't say never, but the odds are against you that you're going to win. And that's why the odds are in their favor that those same, that old jig team that had 200 brush piles was always winning. Yeah. They weren't doing it slow. They may walk slow up and talk like they're old men jig fishermen. But they were power fishing those brush piles, and they just weren't telling anybody about how they, it all came back to how they practiced, how aggressive they practiced, and how they were breaking down the lakes. They were breaking down those brush piles. Was it the 5-foot ones or was it 15-foot ones or the 30-foot ones? And then they, and tournament comes around, they're like, oh, we found them in 30-foot brush piles. Well, they're not getting bitten in 30-foot brush piles. Well, they don't just keep running 30-foot brush piles. If they hit 5 in a row, they'll go and slide up into the 15-foot brush pile. And okay, so they know that the fish are on the move, and then boom, they're that quick to make an adjustment. And a lot of us are still out there just kind of idling around looking for a brush pile to go sit on for 2 or 3 hours. And that's just not the way. And now, obviously, with the technology that we have now, before it took a lot more ability to read your graphs than it does now. Now the graphs do a lot of the interpretation for us. And, when I get in a boat teaching people electronics, and one of the things I tell them nowadays, if it's not there, don't try to force it. Don't make it something that it's not. If the electronics are so good now, if you put it down on a brush pile and you shine out there and there's no bait, there's no fish, pretty much there's no bait and there's no fish. Okay. Mm-hmm. And if you don't see anything, then it will tell you right away. The only technique that you should try if you're going to cast at it is something that's deep down in the heart of it. And so
what you just said, that's the difference between tournament fishing and going fishing. Tournament fishing, being successful tournament fishing, and anybody in whatever region you're in that is always in the check line is most likely approaching the lake or that tournament in practice using the technique or the mindset that you're just talking about. They know they're in brush piles. How many brush piles can I locate before this tournament? How many different depths? And then what's my milk run during the tournament? I have to be disciplined enough to not go wandering towards the bank away from that brush pile just for 30 minutes and just to kind of check, just to see, just to sniff around, because you might get a bite from a ghost fish, and next thing you know, all your brush piles that you've found, they kind of go on the back burner and you're sidetracked. But tournament fishing is like, I experienced this at got volume up. I experienced this at Kentucky Lake. People tell the story.
Reverb in here. Did your headphones die?
It's my computer.
Computer.
it's my computer that decided to start talking to me, so I'm just gonna shut it down. I don't even know how that happened. Weird.
Interesting.
It Bluetooth to my laptop sitting here, and I'm hearing you twice. Okay, we're good.
Well, what I was saying wasn't that important. You don't need to hear it twice, but yeah. So that's the difference in tournament fishing and just going fishing is the work that you guys put in. And like you said, sometimes you'll idle for. I remember Jason Lambert talking about idling for 14 hours up and down just river ledges on Kentucky Lake or Pickwick. Never picking up a bait.
Spending just 3 days of practice just idling.
Just freaking idling. You know, and that's sometimes that's what it takes to find those little sneaky offshore spots. You may only find 10 spots. It may take you 24 hours to find those 10 spots, but those 10 spots are gonna get you a good check, maybe even win the tournament.
Well, I mean,
I'm gonna say 24 hours of idling nowadays might not even find you 10 spots. You know, like, it's just, it might not. And if you do find 10 spots, probably 9 of them are going to have a boat on it by the time you get there.
Yeah.
And so it's a lot more of a needle in a haystack than even that for and I like that you mentioned Jason Lambert in this conversation, because I learned by watching Jason, I learned some really cool things, a mentality that I never even, when I saw it, I was like, oh, it was that simple. Like, all you had to do is see it once and it made sense. But in, was it 2018 or something like that, I fished the Force Wood Cup, and I was out there, it was on Lake Ouachita, and I was out there pre-fishing, pre-practice, like the month before or whatever, and I had my boy with me, and we were running the banks throwing a little whopper plopper. That's something you can do out there in the summertime, and you catch some good fish. And all of a sudden there's this boat, and he's just running. He's running from point to point to point to point to point, and you just hear rah, that's all you're hearing the whole time. And then meanwhile my plopper's like blah 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 blah, and I'm covering the bank pretty fast. I'm covering a lot of this guy's out there just and all of a sudden he comes running up to me and he introduced himself. Jason did, and I guess he recognized that he was a tour pro. I was just a Costa pro, so I was pretty I was pretty impressed by that. But I looked down and I was like, he's like, you're just out here pre-fishing. And then he mentioned, he was like, yeah, man, I'm out here. He had no rods, no tackle, intentionally left all his tackle and rods at home. And he drove out there and he was going to spend a couple days. And all he did for those couple days, he had headsets in, and that was it. He was graphing every single point that was out there. He was looking for where the exact cover was at. So when he pulled up to that point, if he thought maybe a fish, maybe the conditions went where the wind was blowing on that point perfect, and he knew, and the bait were in that area, he wanted to be able to pull up and make the cast where he knew fish were sitting. And also he was marking schools too, so he could probably come back if he found a wad of fish and see if they were, happen to still be there a month from now. But he was just learning everything he could about what was going on underwater everywhere.
Dang, that's what you got to do. Like, no distractions. Leave all your stuff at the house so you're not like tempted to pick up that rod.
Well, even us, like, I had this conversation with my dad a lot. Like, he's got everything on his boat that you could imagine for technology wise that a guy could want at his age, and doesn't use half of it. And I'm calling him out on it, but it's like he wants to go fishing. He wants to go feel the tug on the line. It's like, Dad, just go out there and graph for 4 hours. It's like, I can't do that. I'm like, no, you fish this lake all your life. Go graph for 4 hours. You're going to find so many new things. Pick the southern end of the lake of a 2,000 acre lake and graph the whole thing. You're going to find so much more. You're going to be so much more efficient when you and start hitting those blue dots. Like,
okay, this is great. This is a good segue into a topic that I've been wanting to talk about, not just tonight, but in general, is how it's difficult for fishermen that have been fishing a certain way for a long time to, let me see, I'm trying to start this out right. How much more of an advantage is there for someone who is just getting into fishing, some of these kids that are into high school fishing and college fishing that have come up with forward-facing sonar being an integral part of them learning how to fish and how to locate fish and using that technology? You got that group of people, and then you got people that have been fishing for 30 plus years before the introduction of forward-facing sonar. So I was just listening to Bass Talk Live today, and Frank Scalish was talking about that. He just got into the LiveScope game, and he's a guy that triangulation. He's old school fisherman. He's a hell of a fisherman, but he learned it old school, and he's trying to slowly integrate forward-facing sonar into his fishing game. So it's hard to do. Like, I've been fishing for quite a while. You know, we both have LiveScope. We've had it for about 2 years now, but I still have learned so much prior to LiveScope. Like LiveScope, I didn't learn fishing with forward-facing sonar, you know, whether it be active target, LiveScope, whatever. But there's a lot of people that are coming up right now that are younger. They're learning to fish right off the bat with that forward-facing sonar technology. So I was thinking about this the other day. It's pretty hard for someone to unlearn what they've already learned to integrate that forward-facing sonar technology.
Any technology, not just forward-facing.
Right. We have habits, right?
But if you mean, how many guys have nothing, they have 2D sonar, and then they got side imaging? Even in 2024 here, somebody's just now getting their first side imaging unit.
That's true.
So maybe that's what they can afford. Maybe that's the next best thing. But there's so many guys out there, to your point, that just don't have that wherewithal to trust it yet.
Yeah. So is any of this making any sense? And what's your thoughts on what we're that? Like, you've been fishing for a while. I'm sure you caught them before forward-facing sonar came out. How did you kind of integrate that into your game? And then what kind of advantage does somebody that's just coming up learning fishing with forward-facing sonar have versus somebody that's already established their patterns over years and years, and they're trying to work that forward-facing sonar technology into their game?
Well, you know, I more than most out there, I'm the 1% of the 1%er that, you know, I made my living. I paid my bills selling live scopes and training people. That was, you know, one of the first ones to ever have a live scope on my boat, and I immediately fell in love with it because of how powerful the tool was for my learning curve, for me to just understand these fish. And that's what I fell in love with it, because I just love learning and understanding fish behavior. So one of the misconceptions that needs to be put out there is to say that these young guys don't know what the older guys know is not really fully the truth.
Yeah, right.
They are learning more reality of what the fish are doing and how they're behaving than what some of the older heads are. Now, with that being said, their skill sets are different. So if you know, a technology bomb happened, the older heads are going to be able to survive. But I'm going to take a step back real quick and explain what I mean by that. There's a difference, not a difference. Here's what I'm looking for. There's a similarity in fishing with the construction world. So I'm a tile setter. I've been a tile setter for 20 years. And just like anything that I ever do in life, when I first became a tile setter, I decided, you know, I want to be the best tile setter that anybody's ever met, right? So when I got into the business, are you guys familiar much with construction work?
A little bit.
I'm sure there's a lot of contractors and stuff out there. So when I first got into the tile business, I was on the West Coast, and there was it was all stonework, a lot of stonework. And you know, basically Hardy backer board had just come out, right? And a Hardy backer board was to replace the old slat, lath and mud work that's done inside showers and on walls, and you can't hang sheetrock and then put tile over sheetrock. It's not designed. You're literally sticking a heavy piece of something to a piece of paper on sheetrock and pull it off. So you needed a durable board that was also water resistant, that allowed, you know, something heavy to bond to it, right? Well, before you had to put lath up the wall. You had to put like a plastic up the wall. Then you had to put a lath and staple the lath. And then you had to mix big old amounts of concrete. We call it mud in the industry, right? And then you had to like get your screed boards perfectly in place. Think about the process of everything I'm talking about, all right? Then you got to like screed it up the wall, get it up the wall. You got to take your hawk and trowel and smooth it out, float it out. And then at the same time, by the time you're done, it needs to be perfect. It needs to be perfectly plumb and level and straight. And that way you can come back and lay tile on it the next day. That is a long process that takes a gigantic skill set. And a lot of the old tile setters, when I say old, to be able to have that, to have grown up to where that's what you did when you were a tile setter, you have to be probably about 50 years old is probably and above, right? To have like, that's what you started in, that's what you did. Now, with that being said, there's some offshoots in what I just said where people be like, well, you know, I did it. The people that now still do it, they've held on to some of the old traditions, because some of those old traditions are what makes you the most skilled. So like, if you want to do some of the highest end practices of stonework, you have to know how to be a mud setter, all right? Because it changes. I won't go into too much detail, but the mud work transition to where a guy could just come in, go to Home Depot, put a piece of a board on the wall, just like a sheetrocker, and screw it. He's supposed to screw it, but most likely he's going to nail it, which isn't even the proper way to install it. And then he lays some tile, and now he's a tile setter. So what I'm trying to get at is there's a guy that took 20 years of his life to learn how to be to do mud work, to become a tile setter. Now all of a sudden, because of the advent of new technology, some guy that's not even a tile setter can do the same thing that he's doing. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So technology literally took away 20 years of this guy's experience. And one night, overnight, this guy that goes and watches a Home Depot court and buys a bucket can be what he quote unquote calls himself, a tile setter. All right. And you guys hear in my voice that I'm obviously a little bit bitter about it too, because I'm one of those guys that learned how to do it. And listen, because I know how to do it, I made some good money in the tile world because I had a skill set that other people didn't have. And as time went on, now all of a sudden you can't even find a new age tile setter that even knows how to do it. And his work and his craftsmanship is just it's just trash. And nobody no longer even knows. But guess what? The tile that's out there is fancier than it ever has been. It's more expensive than it ever has been. Now the workmanship's not that great, but the final product it's fancy, right? Mm-hmm. Here's my point. If you're going to hire a tile setter nowadays, most builders, 95% of them they're not going to hire the guy that has that skill set. They're going to hire this guy that's watered down version of the old tile setter. And every once in a while, under certain conditions, when you got a customer that wants some really fancy thing, they're going to hire the old guy that really knows what he's doing. All right. And that's what fishing's going to become right now. All right. Some of these old guys, I come from that stock. I come from the fishing old stock when I was working to myself to become 40 years old. And that was when, you all of a sudden became Denny Brower around your area because you'd thrown that jig for 20 years and you knew exactly what color, what size, whether that was a piece of wood, whether it was a rock, you could feel everything, you knew what, and you became to beat everybody and to excel, because that's about the time frame that you became the top of your class, was when you're in your 40s, right?
Yeah.
I literally got to where I was in my 40s. I qualified for the elites, and all of a sudden the hardy backers of tile setting of fishing came in, and LiveScope spread to everybody, and I was a part of it. Because I fell in love with the technology, because it taught me so much more than what I ever read in a book or magazine, and I loved it. Well, now all of a sudden the age has just dropped. All of a sudden I was finally at that age where I was going to peak, and now I look around and it's all 20-year-olds because of this technology. But with all that being said, I don't hate on those guys. I don't hate on them. Like, it is what it is. Times are changing, but don't go around and say that they're not good fishermen. They don't know what they're doing. And if you took the technology that they did use that technology to get where they're at, but these guys they're spending a gobs amount of time, and they really know how fish behave. They did use that technology to learn how fish behave. And if you were to pull it away from them, it may take them a little bit to adjust and to learn. And some of the old heads would come back and they'd kind of dominate for a little bit. But some of these younger guys would catch on that are being the guys that are really blowing things away. They are learning how to be successful as a fisherman, and they know a lot more about how fish behave than what people are giving credit for.
Yeah,
for
well
sure.
said. That makes total sense.
Well,
I know.
Well, I mean, how many of theories did you dispel when LiveScope came out?
Every one of them.
Every single theory was out the window for the last 100 years, right?
It really wasn't. It wasn't just the theory. What it was is the whys. Okay, there would be part of a theory that's right. And let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. Before, did someone pick on Uncle Randy in the comments?
No.
But okay.
Flat bills and short shorts. I mean, just can't deal with it.
Yeah. Can we throw tight pants in there too? Can we do that? Like skinny jeans? Someone put skinny jeans in there.
Skinny jeans.
Yeah, and shoes without laces. Gotta have laces, right?
Oh,
they're making fun of my socks that go up to my to my kneecaps, and so that's fine. They're making fun of me too. But
you never know when a rattlesnake's going to jump out of the brush.
No, what I was getting at is in the wintertime, back in the day before LiveScope, picture this, that you guys decide to go on a winter crappie fishing trip, fun trip. All right. I think most of us right now, besides those that maybe are on like a Truman Lake or somewhere where there's a lot of standing timber that they know to go jig the timber, right? Most of us outside of those timber lakes, we are imagining within ourselves that we found out where the local wildlife department had dropped some big brush piles, right? Mm-hmm. Or we found ourselves around a dock with some brush piles, and we imagine ourselves going and sitting on top of that and draining a minnow. And guess what? We caught them that way. And we knew, okay, well, wintertime, we needed to get into some deeper holes where the fish would winter. And we absolutely caught them that way. And so from after doing that for 20 and 30 and 40 years, the conception is that the fish ball up in wintertime and go to deep brush piles because no one had caught them any other way. We didn't have the technology or the tools to catch them any other way. Now, fast forward to after LiveScope, we go out there and we drop the trolling motor down and we can go out there and chase around and find the big roaming crappie that are chasing, and that they're one-offs. They're loners. They're by themselves. And now all of a sudden we're catching 5 times bigger crappie. Now we're not catching as many by doing that, but we blew that misconception away. So is the conception a misconception that the fish go deep on brush piles in winter? No, it's not a misconception. It's a misconception to believe that's the only thing they do, and that's the only way to do it. And the reason is because that's really the tool sets that we had back in the day. And so that same concept can be spread amongst, so many different cool things that I love to talk about. Like an example is I was on early on with LiveScope, I was on a river flipping logs, and I am a shallow water flipper, frogger, spinnerbait. I'm from Oklahoma. Okay. Like there is no Okie that comes out of Oklahoma that makes it to the level that we've made it to that can't do that with the very best of them. It's just there isn't one. If someone knows of someone, let me know. But you're not going to go and win an Okie BFL division. You're not going to make it to the Forest Wood Cup through the coasters that come through our area. You're not going to do the things that I've done and not know how to do what we're talking about. Just impossible. So with that being said, I love it too. By the way, I wasn't born with even enough money to have a gas motor, so we were waded in creeks. We did belly boats and mini boats, and so the shallow water in the backs of the creeks, that's where I live. That's what I love to do. That's how I love to fish. It's still a part of me to this day. When I talked about earlier about fishing for fun, the way I like to fish, that's why when I won an MPFL on Harris Chain, everybody freaked out. Like, well, he must not be able to catch a fish because he's not using his LiveScope. And I'm sitting there dominating. They're confused. Well, it's because I've been flipping grass my entire life. That's my favorite thing to do in the world. Has nothing to do with a LiveScope.
Yeah, and that's back to what we were talking about, these younger kids that are using the LiveScope. Trey McKinney lives not too far from us. He fishes a lot of the same lakes that we do. He's been a force to be reckoned with for quite some time. Now he's really old. He's barely scratching 18 years old, but he puts in a ton of time on the water. He's fishing all the time, and that's one of the misconceptions that people complain about LiveScope and blah blah blah. Yeah, it's that technology, but it's also the time, the work that you put in.
It's the same thing that you're talking about. A Denny Brower, 20 years
with a jig
in the business with a jig, and whatever that jig touches, Denny Brower knows what that jig touched, right? Like, yeah. And Trey or these young guys, I don't even Trey any of those young guys that made the Elite Series this year, and probably 30 more down the line that didn't make the Elite Series this year, can look at that little screen and say, that's what that is. That's what that fish is doing. And there's 7 of them there, and they're all doing the same thing.
Yeah. I have it. We have it.
I can't
do what they do, but a couple of reasons I don't commit to it as much, because going back to what we kind of started out talking about was I've learned it's hard for me to unlearn some of the, and maybe unlearn is not the right word. it's hard for me to break habits that I've already developed from many years of fishing and just go out and solely live scope fish for 8 hours. That's what you got to do. I'm not going to say that's what you have to do, but
no, you're right. That's what you got to do.
Yeah, that's what you have to do to really
That's
learn.
what you have to do to learn it. And not only 8 hours is nothing. I mean, you got to have hundreds of hours in. Like I didn't have the same learning curve with it that these younger kids did. I was using it and breaking molds and pioneering techniques and doing and like literally fighting people that were saying that you can't catch bass. So we were trying to figure things out of what to do. And so it was slower, but then we were doing content while we were doing it. And so some of these young kids would pick it up and then they go and immediately within a month, they would be able to do something that took me a couple years. For me, I mean, maybe I'm just a slower learner, but it took me a couple years to figure out because we were the only ones doing it, you know? And that's where the age gap of, you know, the age shrinking and the learning curve is what I'm looking for. How that gap is shrinking, how fast they're able to learn, you know? And I mean,
I would say the younger that they are, the less preconceived they have, right?
Yeah.
We think about what they should be doing, and then our LiveScope's telling us one thing, and do you really trust it? Where they were never taught to throw that jerkbait up on this windy rock point to catch a fish. That was the only way I knew how to catch them this time of the year 10 years ago, 20 years ago.
Well, it's like the next level. And by the way, Stephanie, I'll make you a deal. I'm waiting for the next technology to come out. And that's another question I was going to ask John a little bit later. And when that does come out, I'll make you a good deal on my current forward-facing sonar that I have. I'm just waiting. I'm still running the LVS 32. We both are. We kind of we should have waited a couple more months. As soon as we bought our,
what are you missing?
As soon as we got our stuff, literally like 2 months later, the LVS 34 came out, and I'm like, God, you know, we got suckered by that $300 discount.
I want to tell you guys something. I was stumbling around trying to say an experience that I had flipping logs when I first got LiveScope. You know, there's been multiple times, hundreds of times in the past when I've got on a log pattern, right? Lay down log pattern, whether it's in a river or a lake or whatever. And, you know, you usually, man, you're looking at are they on the ends? Are they up on the bank? Are they in the shadows? Are they, you know, there's a different way. And once you figure out where they're at on that log, it's like running a dock pattern. Then you just run every log the same way. And man, it's just catching, right? And you know, the lay down log pattern is like one of the greatest of all times, especially when you're talking about a springtime deal. With LiveScope, one time I was flipping a log pattern, and I had always had it in my mind that bass was laying up next to that log, and I pitched up there, and I just brought it back to him right in time for him to just jump out and grab it. Right, that's what I had in my mind. But what happened was I flipped up next to this log. There was no fish there, and I'm still trying to figure out what I'm seeing up shallow. If you can see fish up shallow, and you know, I'm going through all these things. I'm trying to teach myself about LiveScope, and I flip up next to this log, and I'm working this bait down the log, and all of a sudden this flash comes from underneath the boat, runs up there and grabs my bait, and I look at my line swimming off. Boom! I set the hook in this fish, and you know, obviously it happened a couple more times. And what I realized was, a lot of times the conception that I had was the fish was laying next to this log. It can be true, but it wasn't true all the time. Sometimes, and a majority of these times, these fish were actually sitting off and using either the drop off right under the log, or they were using something for cover, and they were looking up over there, and they knew that was a spot that they could ambush and pin that bait up next to. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So why is that important? Because you're catching a fish either way. Well, the importance is a good fisherman catches fish the same as a great fisherman does in that situation. But the great fisherman understands the fish's behavior and can adjust when things aren't exactly in the same perfect condition. So a good angler, when he got bit on that log, will think, okay, I'm just going to keep fishing these logs until they turn on, right? A great angler says, hey, they're not making the move up there. They're not making that 15-foot run to pin that, but they're still sitting up off of this. So now I'm going to focus my time on how do I get bit on the end of this log, right? And that's why he can catch fish under any condition. It's because he's seen multiple conditions, and now he's got multiple different techniques. And thus now you're seeing all these different techniques that are used to target fish that are inactive, that are in positions that we can't, you know, fish, for us to get a reaction bite, a lot of times fish have got to be they have to be put in like a fearful state where they turn to be aggressive. And when they're up and around cover, it's a lot easier to get reaction bites because you're banging off of things. You're kind of getting their way. You're in shallow or condensed environment. So now when they get up off and away and they get more, where they can move up and down vertically or get away from cover, this is why you're seeing a lot of these younger guys using a lot more finessier and more Japanese style techniques, is because those fish, you're not able to be as aggressive. Now there are times, but you're not able to get that aggressive bite as much as you are now. You're kind of, even some now, we're getting into a lot of curiosity bites, putting a bait over there and shaking it to the point where that fish kind of comes up and looks at it and gets a little bit more curious about it. And that's what I call them when they're looking at, like, they're not really that hungry, but they're just kind of, and you'll watch them, they're kind of curious, and so those are the things that a lot of these younger anglers are doing, and they're doing it really well because, like you said, they just know and they believe what they're seeing, they're looking at, they know that's a fish, and so they're just focused on that. They're not focused on studying the logs anymore, right? And when they get that figured out, now they've learned how to unlock how to catch a fish that wasn't even catchable before, and that's why they are winning and dominating tournaments over the guys that, because their odds are in their favor. When they go out, they're casting at a fish, and they've learned how to make those fish bite. Where we're still, if we're on the bank, not that the bank's not great, and I love it too, but we're still casting at that log, saying I hope that they turn on.
Well, it just shows you the difference of having LiveScope in somebody's hands that's trained versus not. Same way with being a tile setter, hardy board versus hawk and trowel and putting it on the wall, putting live on the wall, right? Big difference right there. But one of them knows how to use it. I can give that guy a little bit, and he may know how to use it, but that guy that has the expertise on it will shine over and look at it. Because you or I, 10 years ago, you hand us that and say, if you look at this log, you can tell that there's fish there, and you look up there and there's no fish there. Well, there ain't no fish on that log. You just move on. Understanding the fish movement, that's the greatest key of it. So,
yeah, Stephanie has got a comment here. She says, do you feel more gratification by catching them without forward-facing sonar?
Sometimes. I mean, I would. I have a battle with inside me to answer that truthfully and honestly. To be as much, I love catching winter bass, large bass, and chasing them with LiveScope. And at the moment, there's literally no other way to be able to catch them. The closest thing we had to it was when we were catching them just A-rig first came out, right? Mm-hmm. That was a biggest mystery to me. I would, I looked at these guys and some of the old spoon videos and stuff you used to see. I used to think that was the greatest thing. I always wanted to figure out how to do that. And I never could just, I mean, I can't tell you how many days I went on the water and tried to figure out how to drop a spoon and never caught anything. I'm like, how do these guys do this, right? And then when the A-rig came out, the first thing I did was spend all winter trying to throw that A-rig, and I started catching some fish on it. And Grand was one of my lakes that I practiced on, and that was before live sonar. So what I would do now at that point in time, side imaging had come out, and so what I was doing is I was realizing that these fish were in the wintertime. They weren't just huddled down. My dad had always taught me to throw a jig, right? Everything was about a jig. So drag a jig all winter long, and you catch them, and when you caught some, they were good, right? But to me, it felt like there was more to the fishing that I hadn't unlocked yet. And so I'd graph around, and I'd find big walls of bait. And I was looking for, on my side image, I was looking for a hard wall of some kind within that bait, because that told me that something was pushing them to make that hard wall, okay? You don't want just a bunch of loose bait. You want a hard wall. So if you get around a bunch of loose bait, keep graphing around until you see the hard balls, because that's their defensive form. A predator is creating that. And so I get around those hard balls, and they would get so thick with even some bigger gizzard shad that I'd put down the trolling motor. After I found them, I'd mark it, and then I'd spin around, and I'd work my way up there with my 2D, and I'd get my trolling motor right on top of that school of shad, and I might be in 30 foot of water, but all of a sudden my graph was reading 9 foot because the bait was so thick. So then what I'd do is I'd just back up real quick, and I'd throw my A-rig out there, and I'd let it sink down, and I'd reel it real slow, and I'd start feeling the bump, 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 and that's when I knew I was about to get bit, because my A-rig was coming through that ball of bait, and it was sitting there hitting the bait. boom, 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 running into the bait. And I would just slowly until I barely started filming. So now I knew I was below it, and I was doing that all by feel. And then, whoa, man, and there was times that we'd have 100 fish days. And man, I unlocked this world, this offshore world of these schools of bass. And I say I a lot in this conversation. I'm talking about my personal experience, but everybody was doing this and learning this process. Well, then fast forward, LiveScope came out. And now we can literally put in the water and find those same, not only schools, but individual fish and chase after it. I loved it, man. I loved it. I love it. I love it. So that part of gratification, you're not going to be able to do it to that extent in the wintertime. I think back about the time when before LiveScope, and yes, some of those most fond memories, but the thousands of hours that it took me to figure out, at least hundreds of hours to describe what I just told you about how we're doing that. And then, you had your single lures, like whether it was a jerk bait or whether it was a rattle trap that you kind of mix in that process, but it was all we're talking about all suspended fish that are up, up high. Now going into the springtime, I would much rather flip a bank or throw a frog than I would go LiveScope out in the timber. Now, with that being said, if I'm flipping the bank and I'm catching 3 and 4 pounders, and I don't know all the 8 pounders are out there in the timber, me personally, I'm going to want to break out the LiveScope because I want to catch 8 pounders.
Yeah.
And so right. I think that's what you're going to see when you're looking at like the Lake Fork event, for example, on the elites, is you're going to see some of the guys that, they want to go to the bank because it's about pre-spawn time, and maybe we're getting to a spawn if it's nice and warm. But are there going to be enough big ones on the bank to compete with the guys that are out where the giants, like the apex predator bass, where they live out in the deeper haunts?
Yeah. So my answer to Stephanie's question is one of the best days I had in 2023 was there was a storm that came through in the summertime, and it was dry around here for months and months. We didn't get a lot of rain. So that front coming through really triggered the fish, and I just fished a spinnerbait. The water was 80 something degrees. I threw a spinnerbait shallow around grass, and I caught several, 4 to 5, 5.5 pound fish. And that was one of the funnest days that I'd had all last year. No LiveScope. I don't even know if I had graphs on my boat. I might have, I can't remember. Another day that happened this fall was a punching day where I caught them punching. I could care less whether I had electronics on my boat. It did not matter. But just flipping a big weight in that coontail milfoil mats, that was so much fun. But I've also had some really fun days where you're looking around off of a point. A lot of times it's I'm fishing tight to the bank maybe, or I'm throwing a frog out off the bank, and I just kind of get close to a point and I spin the head of my trolling motor, and I know I got a waypoint out there and there's a stump out there. And, oh, I see there's a couple fish out there. And so I kind of pull off and get set up, and then actually visually seeing the whole scene, the fish doing fish things out there in their world, and making an accurate cast, getting my bait down to the proper depth, and seeing it all unfold right in front of me. The fish commits to my bait. I made the right cast. I had the right retrieve. And, I see the fish. I see him coming in. He becomes one, and I fill my rod load up, and I set the hook, and I get the fish in. That's another real rewarding thing to see. So they're both rewarding in their own aspect. And I can't say that I like one better than the other, but one is definitely more visual. When you're forward facing sonar, you're seeing the whole thing play out in front of you. And the other one is, there's something that I don't want to say it's mindless, but it's nice when you got a very solid pattern. Like when it's fall time, you have grass mats in your lake, the water temperature is 66 degrees. You can go out with a frog, a toad, and a punch rig. And it's not mindless, but that's the pattern. The pattern is so strong that you can go out and just take those 2 or 3 rods and catch them. That is fun. I love that. And
well,
in the spring, it's like that too sometimes.
Well, either way, what John said, what you have said, it's unlocking the mystery of the fish. It's figuring out what he's doing. Just because you have LiveScope doesn't mean that they instantly bite.
No, a lot of times you have to work on them. Yeah,
more and more, but it is that you crack the code that day. And for me, it's just that fish biting. Like that's what I live for, is that bite.
Yeah.
Whether it's on a frog and a 6-pounder blows it out of the mat, or I catch a 2.5-pounder that I've been chasing around and I thought he was a big one or whatever for an hour, and I finally get him to bite. Like that's rewarding too.
Yeah, it's finding that pattern, whichever way that pattern is, whether you have to be out in 30 foot of water chasing the bait balls around like you're talking about, or if it's a shallow. To me, the most fun days are when you find that pattern, you lock into it, and you can just go and just focus. Those 10 rods just become 2 rods. And that's what you do. You fine tune it, and you can go and you can just have, the fun day. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen all the time.
I feel like I'm still so green to the LiveScope era yet. Like in comparison to everything that we talk about, like every day that I have with LiveScope, that I learned something new. And I'm sure, John, you're the same way. Even though that you've got thousands of hours behind the screen, you're still learning something every time you're out there, because fish are always evolving and always changing, just like we are, and the technology is. But
getting tougher to catch.
It is.
They're getting tougher to catch sometimes for me. I've seen that so many times where, like, especially stripers, man. Like you hit them with that beam, and they're like right here, and then they go down onto the bottom.
Really?
That happens to me quite a bit. Like I guess usually when I'm like 40 foot away or 50 foot away, it seems like they've felt that. They can tell something's wrong.
I've got a theory about that. That's an unpopular opinion.
We love unpopular opinions.
Is it boat pressure? Is it them filling the boat?
I think that you're seeing something with LiveScope that you've never seen before, and you're telling yourself that it was the beam that affected that fish when that fish was always behaving that way. And there are 2 guys that are bigger names than me in the industry. One of them being Patrick Walters, and the other one I won't name, that I've spoke with, and we all have the same opinion. And because we've been using LiveScope for so many more years than everybody else, that we've been seeing that same behavior from the very beginning. And to say, well, they're just now figuring it out, I don't think it's necessarily the beam as much as it is the pressure of the boat itself, the amount of people that are out there casting at them. Those are the things that they're figuring out. When you're up north and your water is 20-foot visibility, what do you think that shiny prop looks like to a smallmouth when you get 40 feet away from it? Like, you don't think that he can see that? Like, he knows, and he's been ignoring you, but now he's realized that, hey, there's something with this guy. Because now, so they are getting pressured more, but to say it's that that is the beam. I don't think there's full evidence to it. And there'll be guys will say, John doesn't know what he's talking about. I've absolutely seen him change. If you feel that way, is it because you've been using LiveScope for the last 5 years every day, or is it because you just now are using LiveScope and you're just now getting decent where you're seeing these things? And you got to ask yourself, are we just now learning and seeing fish behavior for the first time that we never knew they were doing? They were always moving up and down and around. Bass hardly ever sit still. They're sharking around a lot. Matter of fact, that's one way that I teach people to factor in and figure out a bass's behavior versus other species is by their sharking ability and the way that they shark around, the way they look. So
that's good to hear that, because like I don't have near the years of experience that you do, especially Patrick Walters or Cody Huff or any of these guys that have been doing it for a while. But I just, it's good to know. It's good to know that that's.
Do you think certain fish react different, just like certain humans, different other creatures react? Where there are some of them, as soon as they feel pressure, they swim off, or they sink to the bottom, or they don't do anything. They're just a big dumb fish that's just going to sit there and eat whatever goes by his head. Like,
yeah, I think that there's a lot of different personalities, and there's a lot of different fish that react in different ways. Whether they're more aggressive, upset fish, or whether they're a more finicky, scared fish. I think that those are all factors, and of course, the daily environment itself. Are those fish feeding? When they're feeding, man, they're just as dumb as anything. They're not. That's what you're looking for. Is you're going around looking for fish that that aren't really paying attention that you're there, or they know you're there, but they just don't care because they've got something on their mind. Fill their belly. So I think those are things that are more. And back to your point about the fish noticing, yes, he noticed you. I think, you know, I don't think. Here is a fact. The guys that are very, very the top level at chasing fish with LiveScope. And you guys understand what I mean by chasing, right? Not just finding a fish and casting at it, but when that fish runs off. I mean, I've chased fish for a mile before, you know, like actually following on one fish. It becomes more of a hunt and stalk.
I haven't done that yet, really, honestly.
You become the predator and that fish is the prey and you're following it around. You learn a lot about what scares that fish. You can't, you know, some of the worst thing I'm doing when I'm trying to train somebody to get on the boat with me, and they just start flailing casts. I'm like, whoa, we don't do that anymore. You don't just cast towards that fish. Like this fish, there's not another fish around it. There's no bait around it. It's not in a hungry mood. It's probably already fed. He's not feeding. He might be up sunning. Now, can we get him curious? Can we get him to bite? Yeah, maybe. But we can't just go bomb and cast on his tail because he's in a defensive mood. So he's behaving as a prey right now, not as a predator, right? So what does a prey think when something goes snapping at its tail or comes up below its belly real quick? It thinks something's after him. So what's he going to do? He's going to take off. Well, now you just made 2 or 3 casts, made him aware that we're after him. And now his senses, he's trying to pick up on everything. And did you just approach him with the wind going, you know, quartering at yourself? And so now to slow up your boat, the waves are going, and he's hearing that. And now he's heard about 100 different guys that don't know what they're doing LiveScope when it comes to chasing a fish out there trying. And so now they hear the of your trolling motor. The guy comes in, he slams his trolling motor down, or you're hearing the, you know, the Lawrence go the head. You know, they're stomping on the gear, you know, with the throttle. Like those are the noises that are affecting that fish. I promise you, way more than the beam. But once again, because of our egos as men, we're thinking there's nothing I'm doing wrong. There's nothing wrong with my equipment.
Right.
It's got to be this beam because Uncle Randy said so. Like that's not exactly what's going on. And so we've got to understand that you take time to learn these things. And when the best guys, man, like your Cody Hess, those guys you talk about, if they really got into it, they could spend an entire hour of how they stalk and approach a certain fish. When they put their trolling motor down and they start looking around, they're reading the environment, they're reading the wind, they're reading where the bait are coming in, they're reading how the fish are deciding to school, and whether they're schooling or whether they're wolf packing or whether they're sitting way below or they're up in the bait. Like all these things factor in to what lure I'm going to pick up and how I'm actually going to approach this fish. Am I going to approach with speed? Am I going to approach with finesse? Do I need to sit back 100 foot? Do I know there's no way that I need to get within 70 foot of this fish because that fish is going to notice me, and so I need to make 100-foot cast? Or am I going to, or do I know by the way the fish are behaving that I can get within 20 feet of them and make a little bit more accurate cast? So that's all, you know, that all is experience learned. And the guys that are catching them really, really, really good at LiveScope, the guys that are the very, very best, they're not talking a lot about those details because those are the things that are separating them, you know, the men from the boys right now on the LiveScope. And they realize that, you know, it's just a matter of time before everybody catches up to them. So they're gonna hold on to some of those tricks.
Yeah, man, that's true.
That last 2.5 minutes, if you didn't watch it, go back and watch it like 4 or 5 times because you just unlock a lot if you smart enough to figure it all out.
We need to put some sound dapping. We have aluminum boats and they're John boats and they're really loud in the just any kind of chop. It's like OnlyFans. I mean, it's just you can hear it. It's bad, but so we need to put some.
Did you say OnlyFans?
I had to slip that in there. He slipped in the block it things. Here's Doug said he had to let his jerkbait sit for 30 seconds today before the bass would move up to it. He wouldn't have caught that fish without forward facing sonar. Yeah, that's true. So
I gotta pick on not pick. I gotta add to what he's saying. One of my favorite lures, favorite techniques in the world since LiveScope came out has been a jerkbait. If you were to say, John, pick 2 lures, only 2 lures, and that's all you can fish with the whole season, it would be a jerkbait and it would be a shaky head. Those are balloons.
Balloons.
How'd you get balloons to go by?
Beautiful, man.
I don't know. Full of hot air. Someone's like, that guy is full of hot air. He's full of hot air. Awesome. He's a clown and he's full of hot air.
I've been doing this for a couple of years and I've never seen balloons fly by. What the heck?
So the jerkbait situation, sometimes in the wintertime, and it's usually when the water gets into the 40s or below. I would say between 43 to 47, 48, like 42, 48, that range. I'm going to say, you know, I don't know, Otto, he can tell me if I'm right. The water temperature between 42 to 48. Letting the jerkbait sit forever is what entices the fish to come look at it. Sometimes it's not what actually gets them to feed. Sometimes they will eat when it's just sitting there. Don't get me wrong. But more times than not, if you were to take that jerkbait and cast over that fish and just work it, he's not curious. He doesn't think anything's wrong with that fish. And he doesn't want to expend the energy or calories to go get that bait. But if you let it sit there forever, and even if they're not hungry, they're like, huh. And especially if they don't have to move horizontal, but they got to move vertical, it's easier for them to let air out of their bladder and just kind of move up. Instead of moving horizontal, they just kind of move up. Maybe they come off a tree or a stump or whatever. They come up and look at it, and it's just sitting there. They'll get back. And now what happens in the cold weather, and especially in clear water, and especially Florida strain over northern strain, Florida strain, I believe that the giant Florida strain bass, above all, they use their eyesight above their lateral lines. Not that they don't have that in their body, but because they're in such clear water, they've adopted. And if you notice, Floridas even have a lot bigger, googlier eyes, right?
Yeah.
I've just seen them too many times. They get up and they look at their jerkbait and they're just like looking at it with their eye, and they're just looking at it, and you're like, oh my gosh, he's right there. He's right there. And you barely twitch it. He just looks at it, and you're like, how am I not getting that fish? And then more than not, a lot of times when you do hook them, it's right here. You'll like catch them right there, a little bit of the eye, or right there in that little spot. It's because they were getting up there with their eye, and they're examining that bait more with their eye to decide whether to feed on it or not.
Wow.
All right. So,
I just had a thought. Keep that going, but can you imagine being a little bait and this like 10 pounders like eyeballing you? Like,
well, what you're gonna do is you're gonna sit there. You're gonna sit there like this, and you're gonna play dead, right? Yeah, exactly. And you're gonna look at him, and you're gonna barely move your eyes, and you're gonna be like okay, and then all of a sudden you're gonna make a twitch, and then guess what he's gonna do?
I think he's
just gonna suck you in, and that's what I'm getting at with the pausing. 90% of the time when the water's between 40 to 42 and 48. It's a long pause of some kind, and you have to watch. Sometimes they want it to like sit. Sometimes they want it to slow sink, and the rate of sink can change. Can determine a lot too. And there is no just defining it every single day. Every day is a little bit different. That's why I like to bring weights with me, and I play. And I might from cast to cast adjust the different suspend dots. I'll have like 15 suspend dots on my rod, and I peel them off and I put them on the bait. Is what I do. And so. That fish will come out and we'll get curious while it sits, and then one twitch, and then boom, he eats it. One twitch or a couple twitch, and then he might get excited and get behind it, and then what you do is you match his aggressiveness. If you twitch it, and he goes, you keep it coming. You don't pause it no more because now he thinks it's get away, and he's gonna prove it to someone. But if you twitch it, and you get some separation, and he doesn't come, you better stop because you're losing his attention, and then he's gonna come and kind of start creeping around, and he's gonna look at it again. All right. Well, this time, don't do the twitch. Like, let him look at it, give him some time, and I might give him forever. If he decides to start turning away, guess what? I'm going to twitch it and get his attention again. Right? So if I'm forever just sitting there and I've already pulled it away from him and created separation and he didn't chase it, the next, about the second or third or fourth time, it depends, I'm going to let it sit there forever. And a lot of times they just get there with that big eyeball and they're just looking at it and they just can't stand it no more. And guess what? They don't just inhale it like you think. They lick it, man. They just barely. So you better have shark hooks, the right line, the right rod, because those are the times you're going to get your feelings hurt, because that fish is most likely hooked towards the outside of the mouth and not really inside his mouth. So that's just some of the intricacies of extreme elite series level, jerkbait fishing with LiveScope.
That's good stuff, man. You don't hear people talking about that at all. How often do you have fish come down on a bait? Does that ever happen?
On a jerkbait, no,
Mm-hmm.
no, they don't attack coming down very often. Most of the time, that is when you're throwing either like a crankbait or a heavier reaction bait that falls beyond them, and those fish are going heavy, a little bit aggressive, and then they decide they're not going to let that get away, so they come down that way on. But most of the time, you'll find out in the wintertime, and especially especially in clear water, the fish want to feed up, man. That's their, once again, now they're the predator. They got the eyes on the top of their head. They think they're getting the element surprise by coming up underneath the fish. They got all their faculties and all their ability to attack says come up this way. Even if you think about how the body shape of a big bass is and how it gets below that fish, right? And I'm telling you guys, this is how they do it. This is the bait. They come up and they don't, when they're sitting behind, they're waiting for it to take off. So if they're sitting like this, guess what I'm going to do? Here's the bait, right? Here's the bait. Here's my jerk bait. The bass is right here and he's horizontal. He's sitting like this. Guess what that tells me? He's wanting to chase. He's wanting to chase. So I'll give it to him and I'll give him the chase. All right. But when he goes like this and he wants to feed, guess how he's going to feed? He's going to go like this. He's going to start going like this. You guys know why he's doing that?
No.
Because he's going to use the gravity of his gills to suck. And that's how he feeds. A big, heavy fish, like an 8 to 10 pounder, he's getting like this. He's not. You want to know why a smaller fish, it seems like they hit harder than a big fish? The smaller fish, he doesn't have that power in his gills to suck that in. So what he's going to do is he's going to go boom and use his body weight to kill and capture that bait. So a big fish is going to come up underneath. He's going to be like, yeah, I'm big. I'm lazy. I got my big eye. I'm looking at you. You look right. You smell right. And he just goes and he sucks through his gills and pulls that water down and pulls that fish in. And that's the first feeling that you have on a sensitive rod. And that's why you want to be careful to not jerk too fast and let things load. Because if you have a real sensitive rod, that first tick you feel was actually the suction power of that bass pulling that, and it wasn't the mouth closed around the bait. So that's why a lot of times you feel that second one was the mouth and the chompers going down on the fish.
That makes sense. And that third one is him spitting the jig out.
Yeah.
Now, if I'm sleeping, I feel that third one.
Now, some of the things that I just said are almost complete opposite when we're talking about smallmouth, but that's a different subject from the land of the greenfish. We're talking about greenfish here. There's some similarities sometimes, but there's some differences too.
The reason I asked you about that fish feeding from the top, and it's only happened to me a couple times. One, it happened. It's been jerkbait. At least the ones that I've seen it happen. I was doing a jerkbait video. I think it was last year. I was comparing different jerkbaits with the same rod and line size just to see how far they went down. And I had a fish. The fish was just kind of out there. I wasn't even casting that fish. My whole concept was getting out of the wind in a nice quiet pocket and making a long cast and then jerking it down and just kind of videoing how deep the jerkbait ran. I went through like 10, 15 different jerkbaits. But anyway, there was just a random fish just out there, kind of just suspended out there. And I went underneath the fish and he went down and pushed it. There was bubbles, like a little bubble trail where he actually pushed it. And then yesterday when I was fishing, I was fishing the grass line. It's about 8 foot deep, and the fish were just kind of sitting in the grass. And I had a fish. I was jerking that jerkbait down, and I had a fish just kind of come out from the grass, and he kind of circled around it. I hit it again, and then he went up over it, and he came down and pushed it down. And it was cool to watch that because I thought that I screwed up. I thought I jerked it down too low and he was just going to bass it. But he circled around it and he came up over the top of it and pushed it down. But like you said, most of the time you got to be feeding. They're feeding up in the winter. Well, almost anytime.
What I've learned is John's going to cost me a lot of money because I can't see a fish go underneath it and turn up and look up. Either my settings are way off or he's got something that I don't got. I think it's the latter. So
I've seen that. Yeah. I've seen it a couple times.
Yeah. So I'll challenge you on something. You're talking about misconceptions, and you're talking about your line testing for jerkbaits, right?
Right.
So here is a misconception: your jerkbait goes deeper with lighter line. It's not the truth. And here's where it comes from. I believe this is where it comes from. I believe that this teaching and the books and the articles were written back when people were throwing mono. And what do we know the difference? We're not throwing mono anymore. We're throwing fluorocarbon. 90% of us are, right?
Fluorocarbon sinks.
Fluorocarbon sinks and mono floats, like literally floats. So if you understand that a thicker line would be more dense and would try to float more than a lighter line, and it would have less drag, it would have more drag than a lighter line, it makes sense that mono would allow that jerkbait to get deeper, or crankbait, or mainly we're going to talk about jerkbaits here, okay? When I'm saying this, okay. So let me clarify this. I'm talking about your jerkbait fishing. Now I think there is a demarcation line where it changes, but my point being that fluorocarbon, if you're not just throwing it out there and jerk, if you're actually trying to work it and spend some time, like your first pull, boom, your jerkbait kind of stands like this, like you're throwing like a +1, and now the bill gets ready to start pulling down, right? And if you set it up right, instead of just throwing it in there and start twitching, it's going to stay up high. But if you pull a little bit and let it turn, the jerkbait where the bill will start diving and doing its thing. And this is on a longer cast as well, is what I'm talking about. A lighter line actually has less weight to it than a heavier line. So a lot of times I still like the action with 12-pound test line. I think that's my all-to go-around line for jerkbaiting. 10's got a little bit more action, but sometimes I don't want as much action out of the bait in the wintertime. I don't want it to dance as much. So I'll go to 12. And sometimes when I'm around a lot of heavy cover, I'll go to 14. However, I found myself a lot of times when I got like a +1 and I'm putting by a tree, if I don't want it to sink, I got to be careful going up heavier line, because that heavier line will do two things. It will pull that bait down, and then it continue to get to. It's like you weighted that jerk bait. It will continue to fall, and so now my sink rate's not right, and that fish that I'm having to make curious, he saw it sink by him and he's not going to follow it. So I'm not getting his curiosity to come out and want to feed. The other thing it does is it creates drag. So if my line's over this way, that heavier line will actually pull that bait away from the tree that I was wanting to try to keep it next to naturally, just by letting it sit there. Even if you fed a bunch of slack line out, it's still going to start trying to sink. And so it's doing its gravity is doing its thing. And so, it's not all nowadays. It's not, once again, I'll reiterate, it's not all about, if you want your jerkbait to get deeper, you don't necessarily want to throw lighter line. Now, if you're in a situation where you're in super clear water and you're having to throw spinning rod stuff because your bait's real small and everything, those are all different conversations. All right. I'm talking about just, generally speaking, throwing a jerkbait, and even particularly about how it behaves around the timber in the wintertime.
Yeah, that's good stuff. It's funny you say that, because I was throwing a Vision 110 yesterday, and I flipped it out. I had about 10 feet of line out. This is what we all do, jerked it down. Well, swept it, kind of jerked it down a little bit and just watched it. What's it doing? Is it suspending? Is it sinking? Or is it rising? Well, it was super, super slow rise. Well, I've learned over the last couple of years with LiveScope that that's what I want, because when I make a cast out there 100 foot and I get it down, the fluorocarbon is going to cause it to sink. So it's not going to be rising at the end of the cast. But before, without actually seeing what it's doing, I just assumed that I would have to put a little bit of weight on that bait to make it suspend. And that's something, that video that I did that I was talking about, I learned a lot just from watching different jerkbaits do different things. But that's cool. I need to pay attention to that line a little bit more so, not because of the sink rate, but because of the action. I didn't think about, how much more action 10-pound test gives you versus 12 or 14.
Well, you got to be careful, because too much action can be too much action in the wintertime. You can only have so much action in the wintertime. All right. Right. There's two different kinds of jerkbaits styles. All right. So follow me here. You got your like mega bass style, and its action is like this, is erratic. Right. And then you got your old rogue style that's more of a drag and pull. All right. So the question is one better than the other? And the answer is no, they're both tools to be used in different scenarios. Okay. Grand Lake the Cherokees in Oklahoma is historically known as a rogue lake. It's always been a rogue lake, and not only just a rogue lake, but the big rogues, right? And over time, I begin to understand by watching the fish behavior of why it's that way. Grand has a lot of green turbidity in it. It's really fertile, right? And it's got large shad, even up to gizzard shad. Okay, so in the wintertime, when these fish are suspended up and around brush piles, you put a rogue over the top of them, and they visibly can't see as well. Okay. And so they're having to use more of their lateral lines to feed. And they're feeding, typically, they're going to make a choice of having a big dinner, a big meal if they can, on a bigger gizzard. Well, now picture this. If they're going to want to chase a big gizzard, are they going to want the gizzard that's going and moving like crazy above them, that they know they're going to exert the energy and they're going to probably lose track of where he's at? Or are they going to want the one that kind of pulls, displaces a little bit more water, and sits there and has a bigger profile so they can fill it and find it? And that's why a lot of times you got one of two things. The old way you used to work a jerkbait, where you kind of swept and kind of reeled up slack and then kind of swept, reeled up slack. It's the same reason as a spinnerbait putting out that pulse. Why that works in that time, in the wintertime, springtime, and dirtier waters, because the fish can track it with their lateral lines and they find that rhythm and the pattern, and they can predict where to attack that bait. Same thing happens with a rogue. So the reverse side of that is in crystal clear water. Now, I'm not saying that you can't catch them on a rogue in crystal clear water. What I'm saying is that those fish, you don't want them getting as good a look all the time, and they're used to having a little bit more dance in the base of their chains. So that's where I'm going to go away from more of the rogue style, and I'm going to go more into the megabass style, jerk baits. And that's how when I go to a new body of water, that's how I start testing based off of my experience of one or the other, which one I'm going to throw.
Man, those rogues are still really good baits. Like, they get overlooked. I got a whole box of them, and I kind of forgot about them, and I broke them out like a couple years ago and started playing around with them. I had some really good days on. They're a little finicky to cast, but in the wind, like,
you got 20-mile-an-hour north wind coming.
But if you got a decent jerkbait rod that's like a medium light, you can still cast them pretty good. But they don't cast near like a like a megabass or something. There's definitely a big difference. What about Sasquatch? You got any? We've been dropping science on LiveScope and jerk baits, and what's your thoughts on Bigfoot, Sasquatch, and all that? I saw those balloons and I was thinking UAPs or UFOs, and I almost asked a question about Sasquatch. They're apparently down in your neck of the woods.
I went down to Broken Bow, which is about 3.5 hours from me. It's the Kiamichi Mountains. This is a true story. I went down to Broken Bow one time. I got 2 Sasquatch stories. Both of them, nobody believes me, so that doesn't matter. But I was down at Broken Bow, and I was in wintertime jerkbait fishing. I went down there to learn how to throw a jerkbait in clean water, because there's smallmouth and largemouth down there. And I went to the gas station, and it was in February, because they were the gas station had an old lady back behind the counter, and then there was several people right behind me, and country good old boy folk kind of stuff. And they had a Valentine's Day Bigfoot thing that they were putting on. And so I picked up the little article about it, and I made a joke, and I don't remember what it was, but I cracked a joke about Bigfoot. And the lady looked at me, and all the people looked at me, and they were just dead serious, stoic face look. And I said, "So I guess we don't joke about Bigfoot around these parts?" And she says, "No, we don't joke about Bigfoot around these parts." And so there's definitely some believers out there in Bigfoot. The second one that I have is I was in Guthrie, Oklahoma, at a Love's gas station off of I-35 one time, and these 2 SUVs pull up, and these men in black stand out, and I was just curious because it didn't feel right. These guys looked like odd guys to be wearing men in black suits. Something didn't feel right, so I went up and asked the guys, what they had, and they had some stickers on the back of it, and no joke, they were paid by the government, and that's what they were doing. They were tracking Bigfoot. These guys were paid professionals to track Bigfoot. So there's some people out there, whether it's a hoax or not, that have made some money from the government, from our hard-earned taxes, to go track Bigfoot. That's a fact.
Well, that's interesting that you hear that, because that's a common thing you hear in a Bigfoot story, especially when, like, supposedly one gets hit and there's a body that's permanent that's not running off. You hear the black SUVs,
All of a
the
sudden
men
it
in black
disappears like that.
come in, they clear the area. You know, the military will get involved sometimes, and they create a perimeter, and then the body disappears. And nobody knows
We
what
laugh
happens,
at movies like Men in Black, but you know, the conspiracy theory in me says that that's just the government dropping little breadcrumbs at us, saying that, you know, they know more than we do.
Man, look, there is so many. We've talked about this on here before, but there are so many stories by credible people that have seen or believe in their heart that they saw a Sasquatch or a Bigfoot, that it's hard to discredit it. It's on. I know it's one of those things where you have to see it yourself to believe it. But you hear, if you research it, and there's a lot of podcasts out there that they just have mind-blowing stories where the person just they're either the world's best storytellers or they actually saw what they say they saw. But there's thousands of stories out there, and it's a big world, and I can't discredit it just based on the fact that who knows? We don't know everything about this universe that we live in. There's enough out there that's unexplored that it's quite a possibility. I know it's, you know, it's far-fetched possibly, but I just can't discredit it because there's just so many people that have seen something. So many. We had Matt Steffen on here. Matt Steffen had one of the best Sasquatch sightings that anybody could ever tell. And you can't say Matt Steffen's a kook. I mean, he's a super successful businessman. He spent a lot of time working on Wall Street as a milk and cheese fraud commodity guy. I don't know exactly what that job was, but he swears on his life that him and his partner saw a Sasquatch in the middle of the road stand up and walk away one morning when they were going to fish a team tournament or something. So, and there's countless police officers, physicians, military veterans that have had sightings and stuff. So it's an amazing topic. It's always fascinating to me ever since I was a little kid. I mean, I don't know. I don't know that I'll ever go on a Sasquatch expedition or a hunt, but
I'll tell you what, if you do, I got $10,000. You can jump in my vehicle and I'll take you Sasquatch hunting.
Really?
$10,000. Yep. I'll take you out.
Yeah. Well, will we see anything?
Well, I mean, you know, I can't control whether the Sasquatch is showing up, but I'll drive you around for $10,000. We'll go burn some fuel, go looking for them.
If I got $10,000, I'm getting one of those marine LiveScope transducers, and I'm getting an LBS 34. Right. So, let's
Bass
see.
and Moon. By the way,
we got a winner. Sorry, we got a winner. Got sidetracked.
Bass and Moon.
Let's just ask one more question, and we'll let this go, or we'll wrap it up. I'm having fun. This has been a really nice conversation. 2 questions. One, what is the most visible bait with LiveScope? Is there a bait that you can see, or a couple baits that stand out more? What characteristics make a bait pop on LiveScope? And then also, what kind of technology do you think is going to be on the horizon as far as electronics? What do you think is going to be coming down the pipe in the future?
Okay, so the first question, please, people, listen. You can't buy your way into being a professional LiveScoper. You can't spend and buy every gimmick that's on earth to help you see what's better, all right? The number one question that we get when we sold a LiveScope was they call back and say, I can't see my jigs, I can't see my jigs. The number one question, you have to spend some time learning how to read your settings. You have to spend time learning orientation. You need to go out there and practice. So that way you know what you're looking at. You're not going to see the whole field of vision. And on top of that, if you don't and you go casting around in the middle of nowhere, you're not seeing your lure because you're not looking at your lure with your LiveScope. It's just flat out. You're not hitting your beam. All right. 99% of lures are visible when you're casting your screen. You don't need magic goop to see your stuff better. You don't need, a special kind of metal or a special kind of this. You need to spend more time practicing. All right. Listen, go out and spend more time practicing. Forget about the fish. Go out and get set up on a target and cast towards the target. Go get next to a dock and look at the pole of a dock. All right. look at how the beam grows as it gets further, and understanding that there's a peripheral vision that you see and there's a focal vision, and understand that when you see a little bit of the return on that pole, you might see it in your face way over here. All right. But that pole's over here is because you're picking it up in the peripherals of that vision as it grows out further. And so when you turn your beam on it, you start seeing a harder return, and then it fades away. So now you know you need to go back to this way. So learn how to look at what you're looking at before you start telling me that you can't see your bait. All right. It's absurd. And unfortunately, that's the way the world we live in. If I wanted to right now, all you got to do is use the word LiveScope and like being able to see better, or it works better with LiveScope. They're sticking the name LiveScope on all sorts of lures that have nothing to do with LiveScoping. And it's just a marketing scheme employ to sell a bunch of products. So you cannot replace time and experience with just money to be able to see your bait better. So there is very little difference between the baits that you can and cannot see. Obviously, to answer your question more direct, a bigger, bulkier bait that moves and displaces a lot more water is going to be easier to be seen than a smaller one that's more finessey. But if you have your stuff tuned in right, I can literally see the knot on my line, right? When I'm crappie fishing, a lot of times instead of dropping 2 jigs because I don't want to, and I know I'm about to drop a jig into cover where I'll no longer see that jig, I'll just put a little bead. When I'm talking about a little bead, I'm just talking about a little bobber stopper on my line, about 12 inches above my bait. That way, when my bait starts getting in the cover and I can't see the bait anymore because it's in the cover, I'm not picking up the phone and looking for the next fancy thing so I can see my bait better. All I did was add a bobber stopper, and then I realized my bait's about 12 inches below that bobber stopper because the bait's down in the cover. And I'm understanding the orientation, and I'm aware of my surroundings in the cover that I'm fishing in. So there is something to say about like a harder metal will give you a little bit better and brighter return, right? So there are some facts of science that do have that fit into that thought process. But I'm telling you that it does not make a difference if you know what you're doing, right? Whether you're using a lead or whether you're using tungsten. So that's, I may have just lost $100,000 potential sponsorship for the next 10 years because of what I just said. Someone wants me to sell some kind of special LiveScope bait. But the truth is, if you know what you're doing, you don't need all that stuff to be able to see your bait. It's spend more time learning how to tune in your electronics and understand. If you're the one that believes that you need some special thing to see it better, you have not spent hundreds and thousands of hours on your LiveScope. You barely spent. You're an amateur with it, and you're telling me that this thing helps you out. But nobody's going to get on here and say, I've spent thousands of hours on my LiveScope and John's wrong. It's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. So to the second question, obviously, man, we live in this AI world. I think there's going to be some AI potential. I think you're going to see a lot better versions of LiveScope, because if you even look at the big 3 of electronics right now, Humminbird, Garmin, and Lowrance, there's differences between the 3. Some of them are more detailed than the others. Some of them look more cartoony. Some of them have a little bit more delay than the others. And so what I'm saying is the technology in between the brands, they're going to be competing. They're going to be trying to hop over each other, right? So that clarity, that target separation, even with LiveScope, which I believe is the best one of them all to see definition and on forward-facing sonar, there's still a degree at the bottom that's very difficult to see when you're looking out very far. If you want to see bottom separation, you got to range in a lot closer so that you're looking more down this way at it versus this way. Okay. And so that ability is probably going to get cleaned up. I think that some of the biggest things that we're seeing and no one even has talked about that makes the offshore guys so much better than they used to be is the advantage that we have in mapping capabilities. I mean, it is absurd. The Eufaula Alabama tournament that I won the NPFL, before I went there, I pulled up all the mapping I needed on my cell phone, and every night I'd go through and I'd scroll around through my, and I'd set waypoints on my phone, and I would look. And then what I did is day 1 of the tournament, I knew the area of the lake that I wanted to fish because I'd studied and learned that section of the lake, which was about an 18-mile section, that's where the majority of the tournaments were won. So I literally went out, I picked up my phone, turned on my Garmin's, and sent all my waypoints that were on my phone right into my Garmin's, right? And then I went and ran all of them and graphed around those sections, and I looked for brush, and I looked for fish, and then I found a pattern of what they were doing. And so then if I didn't see fish, I just delete that waypoint. And so literally all I did was graph. I made a couple casts, realized what I need to see to catch fish and what they needed. So I just spent 3 days graphing. But if it wasn't for that mapping at home, I would have never even known exactly where to start to put that graphing. So I think we're going to have a lot more advantages when it comes to the overlaying of Google Earths and the. I mean, even now we go to some lakes now and the mapping's not fully accurate. It's really kind of disappointing. Mm-hmm. So that's gonna get a lot better. But man, you can go all crazy because, like I said, there's been all sorts of cool ideas. Like at one point in time, are we going to see some vision inside some goggle visions and stuff like that? That's something I've always thought was kind of cool. But then even myself, even though I love LiveScope and stuff, even myself is like, okay, I feel like it's just, that's going too far for me. It's like, it's even for me, it's like, that's no longer as fun as if you're like sitting there staring at something like a virtual reality.
You need to be able to see that pontoon boat that's coming at you 50 miles an hour.
Yeah. But I do think that one of the biggest things that will happen also with the live is it will become more 360-ish.
That's what I was thinking.
And I also think that AI will get incorporated into it. And how's that going to get incorporated into it? I think that they're going to either maybe be able to use AI to determine species of fish and throw color at that fish. Like if they think it's a catfish, like maybe it shows up a certain color or whatever. So it can help separate the difference between a trash fish and a bass. Now we say all that, okay, but you got to understand this, guys. Everybody that's listening got to understand this. I was on the forefront of this stuff. When LiveScope first came out, I'm not even going to tell you the amount of money that I called and tried to buy from Garmin, and they would not sell me that many LiveScopes. All right? And the reason is they created this technology. It was awesome, but they themselves didn't even know what they had, right? They didn't know what what the old rednecks were going to do with their technology. And we've done that, and we're continuing to expand. A lot of these engineers that are creating this stuff, there may be some that are connected to fishermen, don't get me wrong, but they're not taking it out there like a professional fisherman is and taking it beyond what it's doing. So what I'm saying is, when you start talking about the AI thing, it's going to take a lot of time for them to be able to actually. I could see if they came out with AI tomorrow, the AI being wrong a lot is my point. And then we're like, okay, you can't really trust it. So they're going to have to get with fishermen that can actually interpret that data, or they're going to have to go out in a controlled environment, let all sorts of different species of fish swim around, and then let the AI determine what those are and then train it to be able to read it on that. And then even at that, they don't look the same in different scenarios. So there's a long way to go, but I foresee the capabilities there. Now, does the money and the ROI match for them to be worth doing that? Probably not. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of investment that has to go into that to get there. But the capability is definitely the technology is out there somewhere for it to be had.
See, when you talk about AI, the first thing you said, fish ID, my first thought was like live settings. I mean, we're in a world of folks that want it easy. If the artificial intelligence just set it for you per conditions and gave you the clearest picture that you could possibly have. I mean, took that human element out of it.
Misconception. You used the word that's a misconception. You said the clearest settings, the clearest screen. And I'm going to tell you guys this. If I was to record my screen and then post it, it's going to look clear. There's something about filming a screen and then reposting it that clears that screen up. All right. And all the time we get people like, my settings don't, I mean, I look your settings, it's not the same way. Mine's cluttered. If you look at my screen, I run what I consider called hot. I want to see all the particles floating around everywhere. And so mine is really, really, really bright. Now there's certain situations that I may dull it down because I'm wanting to look inside the cover. Because if I turn things up, like my cover is going to expand, it's going to grow. But the reason why I want it really hot is because I want to see. That's how I'm able to see some of the details on these fish that I'm talking about. Right. So
I'm laughing because I had that wrote down was hot settings. I was going to ask you if you still run everything really hot, because back in the 32 days when you were running that, I was watching a bunch of your content, and it was always about running your gain as high as you can get it and running your I can't remember the other settings name now. I'm drawing a blank. your color gain and your gain up pretty high,
Yeah.
and having a ton of clutter on your screen, and you see a heck of a lot more on that front.
Yeah. So there, we definitely, for the most part, that's 99%, 90% of the time I'm going to run it that way. Now we're talking about a LiveScope here, Garmin LiveScope. The settings on like a Lowrance are a little bit different. I don't like the Garmin or the Lowrance to automatically determine what they're seeing. Okay. I try to make that processor do less work as possible, because I've seen too many times where it tries to filter out movement of a fish, and sometimes the movement is actually the big giant fish. So you're not getting that bright return. You're getting this dull little ghost-like image, and that's actually what the fish is. And also, like when you're in a situation where you're trying to look further and there's a bunch of bait and stuff up, all right, those are the situations where you can dull it down a little bit, and only if I'm looking for a giant, all right, because a giant's going to stick out. You know, he's not going to be as big a return. He's going to be a little bit smaller than he was if you dulled it down. But basically, you're saying, hey, I don't care about seeing the rest. I'm only looking for bigger fish. And so there's situations, you know, there's situations where I'm not doing it the same as that. But for the most part,
with the bigger fish, when you're doling it down, it's not going to be as big, but it'll still have that brighter return to it.
Which means it's a harder return. It's got more body to it. Yeah, 100%. And the rest of it will just kind of fade out. So there's guys that are, you know, will argue to the point what I'm saying here and be like, well, I've been catching fish and I'll run my screen bright and stuff like that. Well, those guys are probably the guys that are out, you know, doing a lot of just targeting open water fish and chasing around and looking for, you know, individual bigger fish. That I understand the concept. I understand why they're catching fish in that. But for the most part of everything that I'm talking about, when I go out, I'm not just looking to see a fish and throw at a fish. I'm wanting to understand the environment of what's going on. I want to understand my bait and where it's at. I want to understand the movement, how that fish reacts towards my bait and all. And the only way to be able to do that is see a lot more details of what's going on, and that's to, you know, brighten up some of your returns. LiveScope, Bobby Boucher.
LiveScope is the devil.
Yeah. We've both been in the boat with Dell.
Yeah, Dell's down on both shows. He's
scalpel.
scoping up those fish out of 100 foot of water. He's just stirring it up. Yeah, I like what you said about the AI, because AI works. A lot of it works on. You're talking about like Chat GP and stuff. It works on the knowledge that's out there, like the written text that's out there. It's just computing all that, and majority of the available text that's out there is pre-forward facing sonar stuff. You know, it's not really caught up. So you're going to be teaching that AI the wrong stuff, so to speak. So,
Yep.
What do you think about perspective mode?
I think it's pretty awesome in certain situations. I don't personally use a lot. There's situations that it works really well. I tell you one that I love to use it on that's a little bit different. I love to use it when I go up north, when I'm going for smallies, because the rock piles are different than down here. And so you're looking at it from above, and I'll get on a different mount that I can adjust it, you know, so I can take. So typically we're looking at this way, perspective. We turn it this way, and you're only seeing this portion, right? So you're not seeing everything. But if you change your mount, you can kind of look down and look. So I'll do perspective mode. I'll be looking down at 15, 20, 25 foot of water. And if you do that, you can actually see the rocks up north are a lot flatter. If you're looking at it through normal LiveScope, you won't see what you see in Oklahoma and Kansas, where you see the big old rock bumps and stuff like that. You can't really see where it transitions from rock to back in the sand. So from looking it down from above, it looks a lot more like a 360 would, and you can see those transitions. So that's amazing. Anytime you're looking for any kind of beds, whether it's brim beds or any kind of holes or beds like that, it's really good. When you're in a shallow flat and you're looking for stumps, it's really good. When you're looking around grass and wanting to see movement around grass, it's really good. But I would say that if you're a new LiveScoper, new to LiveScope, you're going to have a lot more effectiveness running it normal before you are changing it to perspective.
Yeah. I've not played with the perspective. I know it's been like, there's been several tournaments, one on Kentucky Lake this year, where the smallmouth were spawning on stumps and stump flats. People are using perspective mode to really, you know, get all like several stumps in view, and they can just pitch the bedding smallmouth and stuff. Well, That was a lot to soak in, man.
We covered a lot. And
Save more outdoors.
Better soak it up.
Save more outdoors. You is that going to continue to grow? Are you going to continue stocking more stuff online? Is that the plan with that?
Yeah, I hope so. So, Save More is based off of something that I did back, 10 years, 15 years ago, and doing a bunch of real estate deals where I bought real estate that was in depressed situations. And so basically what we're doing is we're purchasing a lot of liquidated and overstock items.
Mm-hmm.
And we're able to take, because we're buying it in bulk, we're able to pass that on to the consumer. So you're able, the standard consumer is able to come on, and I'm trying really hard. We don't have a lot of cheesy junk. We've got some really good stuff. Like I can't believe how many scroungers we have. The original scroungers, the original scroungers, like some things that you can't even find anywhere. Some of the old trickster spinner baits, the Rick Plum stuff. So
he's a fan of the trickster spinner bait.
I developed so something else that we did, and I'll hand it right here. I developed. We got a frog that we got out the Hypnotoad. Now we haven't done any of the marketing yet, and the Save More, we've been building it, but we really haven't even launched. The website's launched, but the company's not even been notified and launched. So we call this the Bruised Banana. It's just a pretty little frog.
Uh-huh.
Now the thing about this frog is it's the softest frog that you've ever touched. Super soft, which means it's lighter and it floats a lot higher, so it walks really without moving towards you. And those are the best features that it has. We got about 7 standard colors. We got poppin', we call it poppin'. We got hoppin', just a normal frog. It's basically a Spro style shape, if you will. Mm-hmm. It's a little bit different body size, like I said, different plastic and different weight. But that's something that we're doing to Save More. But the thing is, this is not going to be this is going to be the coolest bait frog on the market. I promise you, once our marketing plan starts getting out there, you guys, and you start seeing what we're doing, that you are going to want to own every one of these frogs.
You're going to hype it up.
We have major giveaways. And guess what? Right now, okay, guess what you can buy this frog? Everybody else that wants to compete and sells a frog is selling their things for $15 because I'm basically a one-man show. All right. And we have low overhead at the moment. When I say one-man show, I've got a guy that's working with me that's one man and then me. So there's 2 of us basically. This frog right now we're selling on our website for $669. You buy it at retail, $669. Like you can't get that anywhere. That's what I'm talking about. You're getting wholesale pricing with us. Now, with that being said, we are actually set up, and I intend we have a retail face and e-commerce site and all that, but I intend to actually be more of a wholesale distributor to other tackle stores as well. So with me traveling on the Elites and fishing the NPFL and all the things like that, I'm not really looking to build a business that has all this overhead and stress, and we have to push really hard to do this high volume all the time. I've been through that, and that's not really what I'm looking for. So I'm actually looking for tackle stores that are looking for bargain bin kind of price point stuff. That listen, you can double your money on the stuff that I'm going to sell you, and you can actually give it to the consumer still at a discount. So like, I haven't made the phone calls yet, but like your bigger stuff, like your tackle warehouses and your Omni and your Bait Works and people like that, I'm not necessarily looking to be a competitor to them. I'm actually looking to be kind of a supplier, is what I'm looking to do. And we're doing fishing tackle and stuff right now because we're fishing nerds. We love fishing, but it says outdoors for a reason. We just got a big truckload of Black Rifle coffee in. We got lots of hats. We got a bunch of different hats that we haven't got on the website. I mean, I've looked at all sorts of different things. And so like, for instance, once again, any retailer or consumer, if you want to go on the website, we don't have everything up on the website yet, but we do have quite a bit of stuff and it's active. You can get discounted prices, but if you're an outdoor store, not just fish and tackle, but if you're an outdoor store and you're looking for something that you can, a company to work with, a distributor that will always be passing you really good prices, I'm the guy. Save More Outdoors is the place to be because you can go on our website, go to the bottom right corner and click on wholesale and sign up as a store for us. And when we get these amazing deals that come, we get a really good buy on something, we'll give you an email and you'll be able to snatch up deals that are, once in a lifetime opportunities, and that's kind of what we're doing. That's what we're about.
Yeah. So everybody,
especially in the world where everything's getting more and more and more expensive.
Yeah, no doubt.
We're going the opposite way. We're going the opposite direction. We're going to try to keep things more simple. We're going to try to target the average fisherman. And, we have a saying like, save more, fish more. We want save your time, save your money, go fishing more by shopping at Save More.
Yeah. So everybody listening should go check out Save More Outdoors, sign up, put your email out there so you can snatch up those deals when they come across. That's cool. Yeah, I was looking at your site a couple of days ago. That Trickster. I was thinking of JB. He's got some good stories of some fish that he's caught with the Trickster. It's a unique spinnerbait, very unique little spinnerbait.
It is really cool.
Of
course, we got hundreds of other items too. Yeah, it comes in black. It comes in black midnight. I guess it's black mamba. Is it only black? It's our black
mamba's the color, man.
Let me see if I can find. So I got them just sitting here, like I'm pulling them out of the package. But so this isn't a black one.
And your newly designed office. That's what you got.
Yeah, it's newly designed. So this is our black. It's just a standard black, right? Standard black. Black guy.
There's no weight to fall out either, is there?
Wait, well, either what?
The weight?
Turn it over the bottom of it.
No, wait.
There's no weight to fall out, or is there a weight? Is there?
Oh yeah, there's a weight. You can see the disc weight.
No, that's the glue.
No, it looked like there was the weight was on the hook shank there.
No,
it's a disc weight.
Yeah, I see it now.
Yeah,
it goes underneath. You're talking about the weight. Oh, I see what you're talking about. Yeah.
So I got a certain frog that I throw a lot in my videos, and I've nicknamed it the Black Mamba. It's a black frog, but I put the black on there, so that's where that's coming from. So
this is our Snow White. This is the whitest frog that you will find on the market. It is it is bright white. You can set it up to other frogs, and their frogs are going to have a tint, almost look yellow compared to, to how white this is. There's
when you got three white guys saying it's a white frog, it's a white frog. Yeah.
Look, it's white. So when look at it compared to my hat too. Like, see how look at it compared to the hat.
It is white. Dang, that's white.
When you throw that out in the water, if you're wanting something bright, looking for shad, it glows on there. And there's a lot of people that believe, and I'm one of them, that if you want a big bite in the middle of the day, pick up a big white, frog, and it's going to be brighter and it's going to be more intimidating. It's going to call out the bigger fish. And I'm telling you guys, this is the lightest frog. It walks and you can walk the popping frog, right? You can literally walk it, and it's so light. Just sit there and. So if you have a situation where you want to walk a frog over a bed and fish and just let it sit forever, this is the one. The only downside I can say about this is if you're a guy that wants a deep bloop when you pop it, like a deep one, because it's a little bit lighter, it doesn't have as deep of a bloop, So I haven't played around with like weighting it or something to see if I can get it to make that noise, because the cup's there, but because it's a little bit lighter, it's got a little bit more of a it's got more of a pop versus like a chug bug pop.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Can it jump though?
It can jump.
Put a little English on it. You gonna continue to travel with the camera guy for the events for the YouTube channel?
We're working on details of how exactly we're going to do that. Not to the same extent that I did last time Bradley retired, and we were kind of sharing that expense. And so if my business is in order and things are successful back at the shop in the warehouse, I've got a gentleman that's going to travel with me and film some stuff. I'm planning on filming everything. If you guys are watching any of my social media right now, you're seeing it start to pop off. I went about 2 or 3 months. My phone fell in the lake of the Ozarks, and I was just like I said, mentally I wasn't in a place where I needed to be, and it was a blessing. It blew out of the boat. It was a complete blessing. It allowed me to do like a cleanse, a mental cleanse, to get away from a lot of the negativity that's out there. And when I got my stuff back up and running, now I got punished for it. I got cut from a bunch of sponsors this year because they said I didn't do the social media that I needed to do. And I've determined in myself, I've got more skin in this game than anybody. I need to Save More Outdoors to be successful. I want to be successful. I want all my sponsors to be happy with me. And so I'm going to go on a major, you are going to see the content. You're looking at the Underdog, the content machine. That's what I am. I'm the content machine this year. We got a ton of content coming out. You're gonna be sick of seeing me on social media, and that's fine. That's what I got to do. And once that's up and running a little bit better, we're gonna turn. And very soon, you're gonna see the YouTube come back to life and start popping up. You're gonna see. I'm gonna do a lot more daily videos, kind of like Uncle Randy does, and talking to people. I think those are good. It's a healthy thing to do with like the fans and stuff. And I really haven't done that in the past. It's a little uncomfortable, you know what I mean? Because it's hard to like, okay, what am I going to talk about today?
Yeah.
So I'm going to try to just get over that, that fear or that awkwardness, and just try to do a little bit more of that. You'll see that. And then we are going to film everything that we're doing. It's really just how fast can I get it edited and turn around to make the product that we had before. Travis, who filmed with me and traveled with me, he's going to do some editing for me, but he can't travel. He's got a newborn, and once again, me and Bradley we were co-spending that, sharing that expense, and right. It's just me this year. So.
Yeah, Bradley's a cool ass dude, man. I understand. The grind just got to you do it for a while, and it comes a point where you're like, the grind, it's just too much to deal with, or you just get tired of it. But I really like Bradley Hallman. He's the guy that indirectly taught me how to punch when he won that FLW tour tournament down at Okeechobee. Yeah. I was really watching that, and that got me punching. And he was on the stream. It's been a while ago, but I had the opportunity to tell him, man, thanks for winning that tournament, because it got me into punching, and I've caught a lot of fish punching. Who you rooming with?
I don't have a roommate. I have discussed with Kyle Norsetter to maybe do some stuff with him. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we haven't finalized some stuff because his wife may be traveling with him and things of that nature. So I think there's gonna be a couple of events that I do room with Kyle, but other than that, I'm gonna be a loner this year. And I don't know if it was the negativity that was surrounding me last year with a bunch of different stuff, and then the not catching fish that just kind of scared people away, or if it was just the fact that I allowed myself to go into a negative place where I felt like everybody was against me, kind of deal that just maybe like propelled people away from me. But I just really haven't made friends on the elite series kind of thing. So part of being willing to come out and do some of these podcasts and stuff, it's taken a lot of time. I appreciate, I was getting some props for the mentality thing from earlier in the show, but it almost feels hypocritical because I know that that's the right mentality, and I've had it before in my life, but I got away from it this year, and man, I can't believe how hard it was to get back to that. And I learned what I already knew. I already knew this in life, but I let myself to go down that dark road, and it wasn't just like I could click my fingers and get back out. It took some time, and I feel really good, and every day I feel like I'm a better person than I was the day before. My mindset, my heart, and keeping myself there and enjoying life a little bit more, laughing a little bit more at the haters versus just blocking them and hating on them and like having that back. And so when you're asking about rooming with somebody, I just don't have the friends and the trust both ways, and that's probably just as much for my fault as anybody else. So I'm going to try to use that as my advantage though, and lock myself into the world of fishing and try to keep things as simple as I can on the trail. Just dealing with just working the fish. That's it. Just those two things.
Yeah. Couple of things. We'll wrap this up. Positivity is practice. I mean, not telling you anything you don't know, but I'm just speaking out loud for myself. But it's about daily practice. It's no different than when you go to church and you hear a sermon. You're supposed to take that sermon and go out into the world for a whole week and practice that and try to improve your life and the people's lives around you and create a positive, what's the word I'm looking for? Bring that positivity out into the world and practice that every day. So it's always a work in progress, and practice makes perfect.
Surround yourself with positivity, because positivity breeds positivity.
Yeah. And then back to what you said about doing the daily videos for your YouTube channel. Just in this podcast or this live stream right here, there's probably 10, 6, 7, 8 minute videos that you talked about tonight. The the LiveScope tricks, the jerk bait, the approach of the bass. I mean, there's a ton. So that's that right there. If you just look at any live stream that you've done over the last couple of weeks, you can really break that down. And hell, there's 30 videos in there. You know, you just have to sit down and bust them out every couple of days. Just change shirts and change hats and get it knocked out. But a lot of good stuff tonight, man. I really appreciate it.
As long as I don't got to change my underwear, I'm good. As long as I can
that's under the table, man. Well, you don't even have to wear pants if you don't want to.
No, I will say this for those that are asking about my YouTube channel. I mean, I actually really, really, really appreciate it. I've learned more than ever now. I know how important it is to have, good supporters and followers, and how much it means to my future success. Unless I start winning every single tournament I'm fishing, I'm going to need that kind of support to be able to stay on there, just to afford to stay out there. And so my content is going to change a little bit more from the high quality that it was, as far as, the high definition, the filming, and that, to more, probably more quantity than just quality. But honestly, in some of this experience that I've had, when I spend a lot of time and money in high quality stuff, it doesn't really do as well as just some of the other stuff. So that's kind of the direction we're going to switch, is kind of, try to save a little bit of money, but put more content out there, not become disengaged, allow myself to stay out there, because staying out there, communicating, enjoying having these conversations that I've been having this week, it's been weird the last couple of months. The more I've been posting on social media last month, the more people are coming to me and asking me to do, just doing all these podcasts. I'm not going to turn you down if they ask me. If anybody out there want me on a podcast, I'm not going to say no to anybody. I don't care if we disagree or really agree on anything. I'm gonna engage, because I found that it helps when we're talking about that positivity. I feel energized, and I feel like it breeds more positivity in me. And when I'm just trying to lock myself up and gone away with some of my thoughts, man, I'm glad that I didn't spread that negativity to others, but it ended up hurting me. It hurt me real bad. I just kept on. All my vision was just this downhill slope, and I never saw how I can climb. And now I feel like I can climb. I'm climbing out of it. I feel like I'm out of it, and I'm not going to stop. And I'm going to continue to have this open communication with the world, because it's something it's healthy for me, as well as I hope that I'm being a benefit to others as well that way.
Yeah. Well, I think you're on the right path, brother. I mean, keep it up, dude. We'll be following along and rooting for you. And we got to wrap this up, but I really appreciate you hanging out with us. It's been good to get to know you and stuff. And definitely down the road, we'll get you back on here and touch base with you. And everybody out there, you see the code scrolling across the bottom of the screen. You can go to Baitworks and use the code THM10, get you 10% off any product. And also, if you're going to the Let's Go Fishing Show in Collinsville, Illinois, make sure you stop by Bluff City Outdoors. Seek out Mike. Tell him you heard about it on this podcast.
Get you a selfie.
Get you a selfie, and you get you a free jerkbait custom painted by Trey Harper. That was on here a while ago. Anything else, John? Closing?
No, man.
Comments, whatever.
I can't tell you how much I appreciate the opportunity to be here and to just talk fishing and to have fun. And anytime you guys want to just talk fishing, you got my number.
Yeah, I agree, man. It's been a good time. So thanks for everybody hanging out with us. We do this every Tuesday night. So love to see you back next week. Adios.